How you doing, Lori?
Good, thank you. How are you doing?
Good.
I see we all have our full names now on the screen. Yeah,
Very official.
right?
I think that came from the webinar setup.
Oh, okay.
Okay, 7 o'clock. So I will call to order this regular meeting of the Mount Pleasant City Commission this Monday, September 28th, 2020. And we can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to
To
the
the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, has the roll been taken?
It has. All are present and accounted for.
Okay. Tonight we have two presentations. Our first presentation is with Mid-Michigan College and the annexation proposal that is on the ballot for this November 3rd. I believe we have a video.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for letting me come and speak to your group tonight. My name is Scott Mertz, and I am the Vice President of Community Mid-Michigan College. And the reason I am coming to you tonight is to give some information about our ballot proposals that will be on the ballot in the November election. Excuse me. There will actually be two ballot proposals, and I'll go into some detail about what those look like. I'm really here just as a service to the community to share some information. I'm not necessarily here to advocate one way or the other, but as a good community steward, we wanted to make sure that our community folks are aware of the ballot and have as much information as they can have as they go into the booth in November or vote via mail. So I'm going to show a brief PowerPoint to get started. Then I'll discuss just some generalities about MID in our proposal and show you what the ballot language looks like, and we'll go from there. So let me make sure if this works. Okay.
Annexation is a relatively simple concept, but to understand it, you first need to know about how community colleges in Michigan are organized. Each of Michigan's community colleges was chartered to serve a specific geographic area. Those areas can either be by county or counties, or by intermediate school district or school districts. But not all areas in Michigan have an in-district community college. Mid-Michigan College became Michigan's 25th community college in 1965, when voters living in the Claire Gladwin RESD passed a millage to support college operations. That means that residents living in this area support the college with 1.2232 mills levied on their property taxes. In exchange, these residents pay reduced tuition prices and comprise the college's board of trustees to provide governance and oversight for the college. For Mid, in-district tuition is 40% less than out-district tuition. In 2020-2021, tuition rates are $132 per contact hour for in-district students and $220 contact hour for out-district students. According to the Community College Act of 1966, a community college's district can expand through annexation, thereby offering the benefits of reduced tuition and college governance seats to new geographic areas. So, a community college's board of trustees can invite communities that aren't currently a part of any community college to join their district. Mid's Board of Trustees have formally invited the Gratiot Isabella RESD to join its service area. That requires that voters living in the GIRESD vote to accept annexation and the college's current millage rate of 1.2232 mills. If both ballot proposals pass, then residents in the GIRESD will join residents in the Claire Gladwin RESD and become part of Mid's in-district area. They will then receive the same benefits as the college's current in-district community members.
So that is annexation in a nutshell. Really, it's an invitation for those that reside within the Gratiot Isabella RESD territory to join our district. It applies to Alma, Ashley, Beale City, Breckenridge, Fulton, Ithaca, Mount Pleasant, Shepherd, and St. Louis school districts. And this proposal has absolutely no bearing on the RESD itself. I know sometimes people sort of view us maybe as similar or related entities, and while we have a great partnership with them, we are separate entities. So this proposal, if it passes or it doesn't pass, will not impact the RESD. As the video alluded to, we were founded in 1965 with two campuses. Our main campus is in Harrison. We have been operating in Mount Pleasant since 1969. So pretty much from the start, we have had a presence in Isabella County. Our focal points are on student learning, in particular rural student learning. It may surprise people to know that we have satellite campuses ranging all the way into the UP in Newberry, down to St. John's and Clinton, all the way over to the east in Caro and Bad Axe, and all the way over to the west in Big Rapids. So we service many different communities, most of which are rural in nature. We also pride ourselves on our community connections and our partnerships within each of those communities. We do have the second lowest property tax millage rate in the state. For those that are curious, the lowest is Jackson. And we also have approximately 1,100 students from the Gratiot Isabella RESD area currently attending Mid this fall. The two pie charts that I show here are really how, on the right, the state averages in terms of how community colleges are funded. The state had set up sort of an ideal state of a third, a third, a third for each of the tuition and fees, state aid, and property taxes. And the overall average of the state comes pretty close. State aid obviously has been declining, so that piece of the pie has shrunk a bit over the years. Mid-Michigan College on the left is way out of whack in terms of property taxes versus tuition and fees, with students picking up a lion's share of our budgetary resources. And that makes it very hard to sustain the college when enrollment ebbs and flows like it typically does. So what does annexation truly mean? As I said, or as the video actually said, students will receive a 40% reduction in tuition if it indeed both proposals pass. Right now, the difference is $220 for out-district students and $132 per contact hour for in-district students. This would generate approximately $3.11 million in revenue for MID. However, when you look at those 1,100 students, they're currently taking about 10,500 contact hours this fall. And if you were to move all of those students to the in-district rate, that would save them collectively about $924,000 this semester alone. So if you look at it for an entire year, while MID will gather 3.11 million, will actually return almost 2 million of that in the way of tuition reductions. We had an economic impact study commissioned in prep for our ballot proposals, and that study, conducted by EMSI, Economic Modeling Survey Incorporated, found that MID's graduates received an 18.3% return on their investment, which is far better than the 30-year average of the stock return and our stock market, and certainly far better than savings account. Also, MID graduates earn on average about $8,200 more per year than students with just high school diplomas. So there are certainly some very defined benefits that students would receive if annexation certainly passes. Community, though, also receives benefits in the way of economic activity. MID's current impact is approximately $69 million per year, and we support, through our operations and spending from students, staff, and faculty, approximately 1 out of every 43 jobs. If enrollment increases due to the lowering of tuition, which is what we would anticipate, that economic impact will only grow as students have additional money and there are additional students to spend in the community. In addition to our economic impact, we have trained over 450 healthcare professionals in the last year, or 3 years, I should say. And those include nurses, medical assistants, radiographers, and even some of our non-credit programs like CNA or phlebotomy. A couple of intersection points that are interesting in terms of annexation and with the state and their announced programs. The governor has announced the Future for Frontliners program, which is a scholarship program, which grants students the possibility of earning an associate's degree for free, providing that they have not already earned an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. And how this works is students, if they are in district, tuition would be completely free. If it's out district, it's not that they don't qualify for the program still, they would just have to pay the difference. So there's a real financial incentive to pass and become part of MID's district. The Reconnect program is a similar program aimed at those that are 25 and older. And while that program was initially shelved due to budgetary cuts, the recent agreement announced by the governor and the state legislature actually has put money back in the Reconnect program. So both those programs will be viable and will be a big benefit in district tuition, so they would really essentially pay nothing. Just in the Future for Frontliners alone, so far there's been over 50,000 applicants to that program, so it's really a game changer. MID, most of our graduates tend to stay around the area. We have 4,300 living in the area, which provides a vital talent pipeline for employers. And by increasing access, we only hope that number would grow. Of course, we have many students that transfer on to four-year universities all over the country, really, but our primary ones are within the Gratiot Isabella RESD, obviously with our proximity to CMU. Community members would benefit from potentially running for election. Our trustee positions, we have 7, and they are all open elected. There's no number of spots reserved by a certain county. The same economic study I referenced earlier found that for $1 spent on MID by taxpayers, they see a $5.50 return on that investment. And our total value is $519 million, mostly through the added income that our graduates make and through other societal savings related to health and crime. So MID really does create a significant positive impact on the business community and generates a significant return on investment to all of its major stakeholders, including students, taxpayers, and the society at large. So how much does it cost? MID's millage rate, as I mentioned, is the second lowest in the state. It's 1.2232 mils. So that means for every $1,000 of a home's assessed value, which is not to be confused with the fair market value. Assessed value is 1/2 of your home's fair market value. residents would pay $1.2232. For the average or median Isabella County homeowner, that works out to about $69 per year. For the average Gratiot County homeowner, that works out to about just under $55 a year is what it would cost to support mid through your property taxes. Put another way, if you were to factor in the reduction between out district and in district tuition, if a student attended mid for just 1 year at the in district rate full time, so 12 credit hours for the fall, 12 credit hours for the winter, they would save more in tuition just from the reduction than 30 years worth of assessed property taxes. So it is a pretty significant return on that investment. This is what the official ballot proposals will look like. There will be two. Essentially, one asks, do you want to join the district? And the second one asks, can we assess the 1.2232 mills on your taxes? Both proposals have to pass in order for annexation to be successful. If proposal 1 passes because people really want to join the district, but proposal 2 doesn't pass because people really don't want to support it through property taxes, then annexation fails. This is identical language to what you will see when you enter the ballot booth or when you turn in your mail-in ballot. I know I spoke kind of fast and covered a lot of information. If you do want some additional information or have questions, you're likely to be able to find the answers at midmich.edu/annexation. Or if you can't find the answers or just simply would rather reach out via email, you can email us at friendsofmidmich@gmail.com, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that you may have. So thank you very much for allowing me to come and talk tonight. Again, if you have any questions, midmich.edu/annexation, or email us at friendsofmidmich@gmail.com. Thank you.
And Mayor, Mr. Mertz is with us tonight if any of the commissioners have any questions for him this evening.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Mr. Mertz, for your presentation and for being with us tonight.
Happy to do it. Looks like George had a question. I saw a hand go up.
Sure, George.
Yeah, is that okay? I was just wondering, I've had several residents ask me about this, and I thought your presentation tonight was incredibly clear. Is there a website where that little presentation is available?
Yeah, you mean the video?
The video, right?
Yeah, the video is available on midmich.edu/annexation. There's actually 2 videos. That particular video, which talks about the sort of the process of annexation, and then there's a second video that talks about the budgetary, more detailed information about how we're funded.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions for Mr. Mertz?
Well, thank you very much for letting me come and take a little bit of your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Next on our agenda is a presentation about the upcoming election. And I believe we have another video presentation.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to share our preparations for the 2020 national election on November 3rd. The clerk's office is developing a plan for this unprecedented election and ask our residents to do the same. This is unprecedented in that it is the first national election with no reason absentee voting, same-day voter registration, a pandemic, and an expected record turnout. As residents develop their plan for voting, the first step is to register to vote by October 19th if you haven't already registered or haven't updated your address when you moved. Residents then decide how they will vote from the 3 available options of at the polls on November 3rd, absentee by mail prior to the election, or in the clerk's office prior to the election. For residents that plan to vote at the polls, we encourage you to find out your polling location before you head to the polls if you're unsure where you vote. This can be found at www.mi.gov/vote. You will also need to have a picture ID to vote. We are preparing our polls to be as safe as possible during the pandemic by providing the poll workers personal protective equipment, regularly sanitizing the common touch areas, and social distancing and mask wearing will be encouraged. We will have extra poll workers to speed up the process. Even with the extra workers, you can expect lines. Due to the expected turnout and social distancing, these lines may be outside the polling place. If you choose to vote absentee, you must first complete an absentee ballot application. This can be done by signing up to be on our permanent AB list. By signing up, you will automatically be mailed an application prior to every election. When you completed your application in August or March, you could have requested a ballot for November also. You may have received an application from an outside entity. These entities do not receive the list of voters from us and may not have the most up-to-date information and won't know if an application has already been submitted. If you haven't received an application yet, you can get one at www.mi.gov/vote. You can return your application to the clerk's office via mail, email, or fax. If you're mailing it to the clerk's office, the United States Postal Service recommends doing so 15 days prior to Election Day. You can also take your application to the clerk's office where it can be dropped off in the drop box in the main entrance to City Hall or in the clerk's office between 8 and 4:30 daily. If you drop it off in person and you have a picture ID, you can get your ballot at that time. If you're dropping it off for someone else, the ballot will be mailed. Once the clerk's office receives your application, we verify your signature on the application with the signature on your voter registration, and we also verify that it's not a duplicate request. Then the ballot is mailed. We mailed all of the ballot requests on hand as of September 18th on the 24th, and those received after the 24th will be mailed within 1 business day of the application. As of September 24th, we mailed over 3,400 ballots. When you vote your absentee ballot, make sure to clearly darken the oval. Use black or blue ink only. Place your ballot in the secrecy envelope with the ballot number showing. Place the secrecy envelope in the return envelope, and make sure to sign the return envelope. You can return the ballot to the drop box in the entrance to City Hall or at the City Clerk's office. All ballots must be received by the close of the polls on Election Day at 8 p.m. Ballots can also be mailed to the Clerk's office. If you're mailing, put 2 stamps on it, and the United States Postal Service recommends to do so 7 days prior to the Election Day. You can track your absentee ballot application, the mailing of the ballot, and receive the ballot in the clerk's office on the website www.mi.gov/vote. The last option for voting is in the clerk's office. This can be done daily from 8 to 4:30. The clerk's office will also be open on Saturday, October 31st from 8 to 4. The deadline to vote in the clerk's office is November 2nd at 4 p.m. You must have a picture ID to vote. All absentee ballots will be processed by the AB Counting Board. We will have 2 counting boards on Election Day processing ballots. The inspectors who work are appointed by the Election Commission and must have a representative from both major political parties. The AB Counting Board verifies the signature on the return envelope, agrees to the absentee ballot application, and that the ballot is properly marked. The results for the absentee ballots will not be included with the results for the individual precincts in the city. The results of the AV Counting Board may not be available on Election Day due to the volume they have to process and the speed of the tabulators. If not complete on Election Day, they will reconvene daily until completed. Thank you for allowing me this time to share with our residents some information to help them prepare their voting plan for this election. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Marianne, for that presentation. And Marianne is obviously with us tonight. Are there any questions for Marianne about the election or the presentation? Commissioner Ronan? George, you have to unmute.
I'm sorry for so many questions, but some of us may not have a consistent signature that's actually spot on. I mean, how much, I mean, how do they compare these? I mean, if your signature looks reasonably like what it did on the thing you signed, does that work? Or, do you know what I mean?
The signature that we're comparing it against is the one on your driver's license. So if you pull out your driver's license and try and sign it like that, that's the best way to ensure it matches. But also, if it doesn't match that, we look for the major characters, and usually that's the first letter of your name is usually consistent. And if we can't match it, then we do try to get with you and make sure that we can verify that it was your ballot that you're returning.
Marianne, I had a question. There was a couple of references to requirement of an ID for voting. And I was wondering if it's still people can still sign for an affidavit if they don't have their ID on them when they go to vote.
That's correct. You're required to have a photo ID, but if you don't have one, you can sign an affidavit for that effect.
Any other questions for Marion? All right. Well, Marion, thank you again. And we appreciate all the hard work that you and Chris and Mary and Marilyn have been putting into the election. And I'm sure there's a few others who have been helping out. So we really appreciate the hard work.
Thank you. I'll pass that along.
Thank you. All right. That's all we have for presentations and proclamations tonight. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda tonight? Okay. And then I will open up our first public input on agenda items. This is the time the public can make comment on anything that's on our agenda tonight. And if you're with us here in Zoom, you just want to hit the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and then there should be an option to raise your hand. Or if you're with us by phone, you can hit the number 9 to do the same. Manager Ridley, did we have any emailed comments on agenda items?
No, we did not receive any today, and I just checked and none came in this evening either, Mayor.
Thank you. With not seeing any hands up, so I believe I will close this public input on agenda items tonight, and we will move forward to our receipt of petitions and communications.
Yes, in this section of your agenda tonight, you have the report on pending items. You have the June minutes of the Downtown Development Authority, the August minutes of the Airport Advisory Board and the Planning Commission, and a correspondence was received regarding the 2050 master plan from Alice and Pasquale Siku. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, CICCU, on 419 South Fancher regarding mountain bike trails. And then the last item on receipt of petitions and communications is to provide you notice of a temporary traffic control order that has been issued on West Campus Drive to try the removal of the Pango parking signs along that area. And that will be in place for 90 days before it comes to you for consideration.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. And are there any items that need to be removed from the consent calendar tonight? Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, I'd like to remove number 14 and 15 for discussion. Thank you.
Okay. So item number 14 and 15 will be removed from the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Seeing no other hands up, Manager Ridley, can you introduce our consent calendar items tonight?
Yes, the items that are remaining are for you to consider approval of the minutes of your regular meeting of September 14th and the closed session of the same day, and the approval of the minutes of the joint meeting of September 17th. And the last item is approval of payrolls and warrants.
Okay. Commissioner Tolis.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
And Commissioner Gillis.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the consent calendar and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Tolis, I still see your hand up.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Seeing no hands up, we can move to a roll call vote to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay. Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lalone,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
That passes 7-0.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Tonight we have two public hearings. Our first public hearing is on an ordinance to amend section 71.27 and 71.45 of City Code regarding parking in snow emergencies and consider approval of the same. Manager, really, did you want to give maybe a brief overview of this topic before I open the public hearing?
Certainly. As you indicated, this public hearing is related to overnight parking restrictions. And currently, overnight parking is not allowed in the downtown area streets from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. all 12 months of the year. And this ordinance amendment does not recommend any changes to those parking restrictions. Also, currently, overnight parking is allowed in the rest of the city from the months of April 1st to December 1st, but is prohibited for 3 hours every night for the 4 months of December through March. So due to the various reasons that were outlined in your commission memo in the agenda packet, this ordinance amendment would remove that 3-hour restriction for the months of December through March. It would instead be replaced with the ability to declare a snow emergency, in which case the days and times of the restrictions would be communicated to the public at large. This snow emergency would be used in instances where it's determined that the streets can be more safely cleared and more completely cleared with no cars in the way, and would be give individuals appropriate notice to be able to make that movement happen. So after holding the public hearing this evening, we recommend you approve the ordinance amendment as presented.
Thank you very much, Manager Ridley. I will now open the public hearing on this matter. And if any member of the public with us tonight would like to speak, just remember to use the raise hand function or to hit 9 on your telephone. I'm going to recognize Mr. Delbert Humans. I hope I'm saying that right. Looks like.
Mr. Yeomans, you have ability to speak now to the commission.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Yep. I just asked that you state your name and your address just for the record keeping.
Delbert Yeomans, 220 1/2 West Locust, Mount Pleasant, Michigan. I actually own the duplex I live in, and one of the biggest problems we had last year was parking. And a lot of the times, because we have 4 vehicles per unit, but we only have like a 3-car parking space. So one of us had to park on the street overnight, and getting ticketed was kind of a risk every night. And it was a major inconvenience. I had somebody from the city come out and try to help me see if maybe there was a way I could extend the parking, but with current codes, I wasn't able to. He actually sent me an email about this meeting that made me aware that we would have the opportunity to express that concern. That's all I have.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Manager, did we have any emailed comments on this public hearing?
No, sir.
All right. I'm not seeing any more hands up in the part attendees. And so I will close the public hearing on this matter and then open up the floor for discussion. Commissioner Ronan.
Yeah, I thought, again, I thought we were going to try it for a year. Am I just misremembering all this? I thought the argument was that what we're going to do is we're going to try it for a year. If it works, then we make a permanent change. Or did I just make that up?
So
I
George,
think I might have. I'm sorry?
Commissioner Ronan, before we get too far, I guess I would ask that if you're willing to make a motion.
I make a motion to approve. Fine. I move to approve.
Okay. And then we just need a second. I see Commissioner Tolus's hand was up.
I'll take that down. I was just waiting to make a comment.
Okay. And Commissioner Alsager?
I will second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the ordinance changes as presented and seconded. And then I'll open up the floor for discussion. And if you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I assume everybody's got a memory that's long enough for what I misspoke out of turn or whatever. But I mean, it's just that issue. I thought that we were going to do it for a year, check on it. If it worked okay, then we make it a permanent thing. But, that's my only.
If I may, Mayor, we certainly can do a review of it in a year, Commissioner Ronan. And if we find that it didn't work or we want changes made to it, we could amend the ordinance at that time. The reason we didn't draft it as a one-year trial period is because then if it does work well and you don't want to make changes, we would still have to go through another process to have it reapproved after that. So we thought this might be a more efficient way to do it, to get it on the books in the event it does work. But if it doesn't, and you want a report done at the end of that year, we can always amend it or revise it back to the prior ordinance at that time.
Thank you. I probably should have emailed you ahead of time.
It's okay.
Is the assumption then, do a follow-up question?
Yeah, you go ahead.
The assumption that any difficulties?
Hey, George, I think I got a lot of feedback and I couldn't hear what you said. So if you could just repeat.
So is my assumption then is that we'll get a report at the end of the year that says.
Yeah, we can certainly do that if the commission would like that.
We could make that as part of the motion as with an amendment if you like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tolis?
Yes, thank you. I won't be supporting this. As I mentioned before at our last meeting, you had comments by Mr. Yeoman, and he has a duplex, if I understand that right, with 3 parking spaces and should have 4. So we have a problem there with zoning requirements. I think trying to do this is not going to work. Trying to not have it, no parking between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Excuse me. I think there's a safety factor there. I'm in the business of snow removal. That's one of my businesses. Been in it for 40 some years. You create a safety hazard when you don't plow parking spots. The accumulation of snow stays there. It gets frozen down. Then you're going to try to take a grader truck back out again at 35 or 40 miles an hour and re-scrape this off, which is going to cause excess wear to the equipment and everything else. And then that's also a safety factor of hitting that and then possibly losing control of a truck. And I don't think we can do this on a notice. How are we going to do this on an emergency notice, not to park on the street? I mean, it's tough enough getting them done now with the ordinance in place than trying to do something on an emergency notice. I think we're just creating a lot of problems. Just like Mr. Yeoman, he's got a problem. He's got a duplex, okay, with only 3 parking spots. Well, you should be allowed at least 2 parking spots per unit. I mean, how do we go to another problem or another situation and create a problem there when the problem really isn't there? It's on our parking requirements. And I think it should be fixed there and not trying to mess with this now. You've already got a system. It works, you know. Let's leave it in place. Why try something else that's going to be a safety factor? I mean, and it's also going to be costing more on equipment that you're going to be damaging in the equipment when you're trying to re-scrape this down. And not only that, once you scrape it down and it sits there for an amount of time, you're not going to be able to get it straight right down to the blacktop, which means you're going to have additional costs in going back and resalting all these spots that weren't clean the first time around. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, I would hope my fellow commissioners heed the advice of someone who has done this and it's been his profession for 40 years and that he has credibility of what he's talking about. For myself, I have 4 cars in our family, 2 adults and 2 young adults, and we have had to shuffle through the winter months several times. That's what you do. You just bring the cars off the streets and you park behind each other. Yes, it was inconvenient, but for the safety factor of being able to plow efficiently and the fact, in my opinion, trying to put out an emergency code or emergency call to say move your vehicle is going to be a lot less effective than just keeping the policy that everyone is used to in Mount Pleasant. Everyone realizes what the policy is. You have to have your cars off the street after from 2 to 5 in case the snow comes. A lot of times we don't even know how much snow is going to come. I mean, we all know the weatherman is incorrect, might be predicting 1 inch and it comes in 3 inch. And we didn't call an emergency call to move your car, yet we have to have the plows out. So that's just one of my concerns. My second concern is that we're not doing it. We are not providing a policy that's consistent citywide. We are making a different policy for our downtown tenants versus our neighborhood community. And I think that right there speaks volumes of that we find it not being able to snowplow downtown in an efficient manner, yet we can somehow do our neighborhoods with cars parked out in the streets. It creates the same problems downtown, so that's why they're not doing it downtown, as it does in our neighborhoods. My last point is the more immediate danger to our neighborhoods and our streets being used as parking lots. I've had concerns about this. I expressed my concerns last time about changing this ordinance, and it was presented in our packets, housing study. It would make it more beneficial for affordable housing or low-income housing units if they could park in the streets. What does that say to you, people? When I hear it makes it more affordable for low-income housing and affordable housing, that means they're not going to be providing parking on site. They're going to be using our city streets to park in for their tenants. Now, that would be fine if there was restrictions that you only park in front of your parcel, but that's not going to be the case. They will be parking in front of other people's residence. When I brought concerns to this, because and I'll say again, so the public is aware of it, that may have not caught it before when I previously stated, my concerns in the zoning ordinance was just this, that there was no parking requirements for new development. I had a huge concern. I was told again and again, we have this stipulation, you can't park between 2 to 5 in the winter months on the city streets. Thus, they would be providing parking within their own parcel. Not even 2 years later, now we're changing the ordinance that I had my safeguard, had set my safeguard in. Let me give you an example that was told to me by our city planner, Jacob Kane. a business over here on the west side by Ganyard School, by the church, across from the church. It used to be called Piccadilly Store. It now homes a catering service. The catering service wants to expand their building. They're building in whatever, they have a long parcel deep. So they could expand it to the back, but they want to expand it to the east, which would take up their parking spaces. So in order to expand their catering business, they want to expand to where their parking is, and they think it's beneficial to them if they could now park their cars when they're working and their business vans in the street. We have 4 residential homes all the way around that commercial business here on the west side, down Broadway by Ganyard School. Now we are going to change an ordinance to allow this business to park their commercial vans, their cars in the street because they want to take their parking area and turn it to expand the building. This is just one incident. This is just one person that wants to do that. How many more parcels in the city of Mount Pleasant have owners and developers that want to expand the footprint of their building, their apartment, their commercial building, to get rid of their pavement, their parking area, and then allow the city streets become their parking lots? There is a lot of them. There will be a lot of them. In a year's time, we won't be able to reverse this. Commissioner Ronan, you were asked to review. We won't be able to reverse this because people will have already started accommodating street parking for their parking on site. An argument can be made, well, right now they can park on the streets. You know, a tenant or someone can park on the street, sure, and that does happen. But in this wintertime, we do have the caveat that you have to have somewhere inside the parcel to park. So it doesn't give people a reason not to provide parking on site. They wouldn't park in the street if they had a parking space on site. So our problem is providing parking spaces on site. And our problem, I mean, it was a good thing in the zoning ordinance to not require parking because we can see the glutton of parking on Kmart, Meijer, JCPenney. That was overkill. But they have to be able to accommodate their customers or their tenants on site and not use our city streets, taxpayer funded, taxpayer kept, taxpayer, it's owned by the taxpayer. And personally, I don't want to see apartment people, if someone was to build an apartment building next to me, they didn't have any parking, Planning Commission didn't require any parking, their tenants could be parking in front of my house. That if I have overflow guests or my kids need a parking space because I have to pull out of my driveway, that should be how it's used and utilized by me, the homeowner who's paying for the taxes around that. So I really think we're going down into a deep rabbit's hole, opening this up. I would hope, I've been on the City Commission 5 years. I started out in 2005 on the Planning Commission for a full term and been involved in the Planning Commission in zoning and master plans. So I would hope you would just reconsider this and the impact that it's going to have in all these different areas that I have just mentioned. So I appreciate your time listening to me, fellow commissioners, and the public. Thank you.
Commissioner Alsager?
I'm listening to the arguments made against, and I'm reading the arguments for. And I guess I would ask maybe if Jacob Kane could explain some of the bullet points about the need that's been expressed for this.
So, Commissioner Alsager, I don't think that Mr. Kane is with us tonight.
Okay.
But Manager Ridley or Director Merdeza are both with us.
I can take a stab at it, Mayor. The primary reason it was brought forward is we regularly receive requests from residents asking to open this up year round. And I think even earlier this year, you received a couple written communications from city residents that had asked for it. So that's really the primary reason that we started looking at it. And the current master plan that's been in place since 2014 also recommended it as something that the city should consider. And what we find is, due to the transient nature of our community, we are re-educating community members every year about the limitation of it. And we say it's because we need to be able to clear the streets of snow, but because we so rarely do it at that time of night, the residents sometimes feel confused by, well, if you don't really clear at 2 a.m., why can't my car be there at 2 a.m.? And they often come from communities where they do have the declaration of snow emergency type of things, and have seen that work successfully. And then, as Commissioner Gillis mentioned, in the housing study that you received earlier this year, that was one of the recommendations, as far as by having a developer being able to provide the minimum amount of parking that they think they need, it can make their costs slightly less in their development, knowing that other parking may be available. And so those are the primary reasons that we brought it forward to you for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Tolis?
One more quick comment. I know we have the 2 to 5 a.m. posted, but usually if you're in the business, you know, whenever it stops snowing, you plow. It could be 12 o'clock, it could be 1 o'clock, it could be 1:30. But basically, the citizens know that you can't park there 2 to 5. They're not going to leave their car on the street. They're not going to come out and move their car at 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. And I'm just saying, it works, and why mess with it? It just doesn't make any sense to me, because there's safety factors, as I mentioned before. You're going to have more damage to equipment. You're going to have more excess salting that you're going to have to do for a safety factor, because you're not getting it off the pavement at the time that it quits. So once it freezes down, then you've got a whole nother problem.
Commissioner Gillis, I see that your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. Nancy, could you also just verify that we do have a business on the west side here? Because I know you and I and Jacob Kane had this meeting, which is talking about expanding their catering business, and then thus being not having a place to park, and wanted also, just for that fact, to be able to park his catering vans and, you know, his own personal vehicle in the road and take up the parking for a building.
Yes, Commissioner Gillis, you are correct. We did talk about that as an example. The only thing I don't recall specifically was the expansion of the business, as you indicated, to the east or the west versus the north or the south. I didn't remember that specific detail, but you're right. There were conversations with that business owner about wanting to have a catering business there and potentially not having parking on site to maximize his business. So you are correct that those conversations have occurred.
Right. And just to clarify, the catering business is already there. It has been used out of that site several years, probably the last 10 years. And then another person took it over and was selling sandwiches and soups out of it. And then it returned to the catering business. So it has worked for a catering business for several years, except a new owner now has bought that building and doesn't want to have providing parking on site. So I just want to make clear that everyone knows we're not harboring some new business that's coming in. It is already currently there.
And Commissioner Gillis, I don't recall, were there two separate lots there that are being treated independently now, whereas before it was one business that had both lots? I don't recall the specifics.
No, it's always been two owners, but the other one that was on the west side of that building was so dilapidated that it has finally been raised. It's no longer there, but the parcel is for sale. But the other side of the building with the catering business on the east side is still there.
Okay.
So he actually could buy the parcel that's right next to him. The wall has been taken out and use that if he wanted to expand. And these are all things that developers or new business owners should take in account before they, ask for us to make amends to a zoning ordinance or make amends to traffic control orders to accommodate what they now want to happen in their business. I really don't feel comfortable doing that. And I really don't think this is the way to go. I think it's going to create so many more problems than what we've ever intended. So thank you.
I just want to make, I hear the concerns from Commissioner Tolis and Commissioner Gillis about this ordinance. And I think they're very legitimate. I think that one of the most unexpected, but most maybe difficult things that this commission has tackled in the last couple of years is what to do with snow and ice in the winter when it comes to either our sidewalks and our streets. And it's just one of the realities of living in Michigan or really in, a northern climate is that it's unpredictable and it presents a wide array of unique situations anytime it snows or rains and it's cold outside. And so I understand that the concern when it comes to, the challenge of making sure that our transportation and mobility routes are clear and able to use in a safe manner. However, I do think that city staff has put a lot of research into this proposal. I think they feel strongly that it's at least viable to try. And so I want to make just amendment to the motion that staff gives us a report at the end of the snow season just on how things go if this passes. And so I want to make the motion that we receive a report. And I just look for a second for that. Commissioner or Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I will second that.
Okay. And then I'll open up discussion just for that amendment to include a report after the snow season. Commissioner Ronan. George, you are muted, just so you know. Yep.
You're still muted.
There we go.
I don't know. I've been online for a long time. I should have gotten over this by now. I apologize. Look, I just, I really think a year trial. I don't know how else to. So I second that. But I guess I'd be against any zoning changes or allowing people to think that this is going to be permanent, right? That's what I was hoping for. That we just because I'm willing to be a scientist. I'm willing to collect data and say, hey, let's see what happens. But I'm not willing to, not if people are going to already say woohoo and they're going to take over parking spaces and do stuff that forces them to have to park in the street. That wasn't the sense of what I thought we were doing. So if we're passing an ordinance that says, hey, go ahead, take away your parking spaces, now start parking in the street, and you can't reverse it, that worries me a little bit more. But if it does pass, I certainly want something at the end of the year. I thought it was going to be temporary. I'm worried. I don't know what the outcome is.
Commissioner Tolis.
Yes, I have to agree with Commissioner Ronan and Commissioner Gillis. And I have some input on that party store that was there. That was condemned by the city. One of my companies demoed that building, and it is up for sale now, which could give plenty of space to the catering place to the west. It's for sale, and he's got a very reasonable price on it. But what you're going to create now is he's saying, well, I need more parking. Well, you have parking behind that building also where you could park 3 or 4 vehicles. But now he's going to say, well, I can park on the street now, and I'll just expand and eliminate my parking lot and expand my building. Well, you have another viable option there. You can go buy the empty lot that's next to it right now at a reduced price and expand your business. I mean, we are creating other problems right now. And I really don't want to see that, and I'm not in favor of doing that, as Commissioner Ronan said. Thank you.
Okay. So I don't see any other hands up, so I think it'll be appropriate to, Commissioner Gillis. I just want to reiterate, we are talking just about the report in 1 year, not the original motion.
Well, and I don't want to get into an amendment on top of an amendment. But we might be able to put a caveat that we are trying this for purposes of snow plowing and snow removal, and not be it allowed to be used on planning site plans. So that if someone in the next 12 months brings a site plan and they want to incorporate their parking for a new apartment, for an additional apartment to their apartment building, to a expansion of a business such as here on Broadway, that they would not be allowed to do that within this time frame. Because you were going to say something, Nancy?
I was just going to say that the zoning ordinance already indicates that there's no minimum parking requirements when a lot is redeveloped. If they put no parking in, they have to receive planning commission approval for no parking whatsoever on the lot. But certainly with this amendment, if it passes, as staff works with individuals who are modifying their businesses over this next year, or taking proposals to the Planning Commission, we will certainly make it clear to them, if this passes, that this is, as Commissioner Ronan referred to, a kind of a 1-year trial period, and it will be reevaluated, and then there's no guarantee that it will stay in place in the future. So that review will give us the information to make sure that individuals understand that as they make modifications to their properties.
Well, I would like to get a lawyer's opinion on that, because if somebody expanded their business under the assumption they could park in the streets and we ended up reversing that, I think they would be grandfathered in. We would not be then have to come back to them in 12 months and say, oh, well, we decided that really wasn't working. So we're going to now tell you you have to park after you've already built over what your parking area used to be. Now you got to find another parking area. We would be up for liability for that. So unless we can make a caveat that allows this not to be used in a site plan at the Planning Commission during this first year, that those people will still have to move from 2 to 5 if this was reversed, or it would have to be added in, or that this would only apply for snow plowing and not to be used for a site plan review, so that we're granting someone they can park on the street. And then after they build their expansion or even a new building, we say, nope, you have to find parking. There's no way we can do that and reverse that decision without being liable.
I think that the issue that's presented by Commissioner Gillis is, I guess in my view, seems like it's a separate issue from what we're talking about immediately. We're talking about the amendment to get a report I do understand the concern about businesses opening up under the, sort of the idea that their, that their parking needs are probably less than what they might be in the future. I'm not sure how that plays out. And so I think that's a good point to bring up. But for our discussion right now, I think I just want to focus on the amendment. And so I see that we don't have any other hands up except for Lori's, which I think is just her previous comment. And so let's go to a roll call vote just on the amendment. And this is just to have a report at the end of the snow season on this ordinance, granted if it passes.
Okay. Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Malone, Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
No.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
So that passes 6-1.
Okay. So now we are back to the original motion as amended. And to get to Commissioner Gillis's concern, I don't know that I'm not sure that I have the information to answer that question or that concern. Manager,
I could
really,
make a motion. I could make, or an amendment to the motion.
my concern is that deals in with our zoning ordinance, and that's not really what's before us. It's a completely separate sort of animal. And so I don't know that we're, what our.
Well, we could make a motion that this traffic ordinance would not apply to any new site plans that were being built within the next 12 months. That they could not use this as a guarantee that they can use parking on the streets from 2 to 5, that this only applies, that it would not apply this zoning, or traffic ordinance would not apply for any new site plans for this 12-month review. So we don't have someone like the catering business or anyone else that thinks this might be a way to not provide parking on their own development or their own business entity or their own apartment complex and use the streets.
So
I'll need a second.
is that a motion? Okay.
Yeah. An amendment to the motion, the original motion to.
Chris, do you have that motion?
So this would be amending the motion that businesses that have redevelopment or new construction within the next 12 months wouldn't be able to use this change to the overnight parking in order to eliminate the need for parking?
Yes. Until the trial period.
Well, technically, so we don't have a trial period, but you're saying
For the first 12 months,
first 12 months.
when the review comes, right? Because we'll have a better understanding of how this really has impacted us.
Well, really, I think we'll get the review probably in 6 or 7 or maybe 8 months, but I see a few hands up, and so Commissioner Lalone, your hand is up, I think, first.
Support of this. I'm just curious, are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to do that? Like, it sounds like, are we not allowed? I don't know. It sounds good, but I don't know if we're allowed to do it.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly certain because it's impacting zoning. but you're doing it through the regulatory ordinance. And typically zoning changes start at the planning commission. So I'm not 100% certain, to tell you the truth, but I guess if the commission passes it, we could talk with the attorney about the enforceability of it and report back to you at the next meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. On the floor, Kristen, your hand is still up. Did you have?
Sorry.
That's okay. Commissioner Tolis?
Yeah, I would like to see this tabled and have an attorney's opinion on it. You know, we've wasted enough time already. That's what we have a city and attorney for. We have no zoning requirements. And now we're trying to implement something where this person can sit there and say, well, I'm going to park my vans on the street now, and I'm just going to expand my building. It just doesn't make any sense. You're getting the cart before the horse. Let's get an opinion on it. Is it legal or isn't it legal?
Was that a motion, Commissioner Tolis, to table?
I will make that a motion to table it and get a legal opinion on this.
I would second that motion.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
excuse me, Mr. Mayor, do we still, Commissioner Gillis made a motion. Do we still have to deal with that motion before moving on to Commissioner Tolis's motion?
I don't think we do. It's never seconded.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay.
no, I believe Kristen, Commissioner Lalone did second the motion. Did second Commissioner Gillis's motion.
I couldn't hear.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I think the cleanest way would be to vote on that amendment, because that way the city attorney would then know what he's writing a legal opinion about. So if you were to vote on Commissioner Gillis's amendment, seconded by Commissioner Lalone, if you vote on that, then you can vote on Commissioner Tolis's motion to postpone, I think would be the cleanest way.
Yeah, I feel like that might be the best way to proceed if everyone feels that's appropriate.
I have to apologize. I didn't think there was a second on there. I couldn't hear Commissioner Lalonde.
Okay. So I guess I still want to have the floor open for some discussion, if there is some, on Commissioner Gillis's motion. I see Commissioner Lalone, your hand is up.
Yeah, okay, so we're talking about just specifically Lori's addition, or we're not talking about Pete's?
Right.
Actually, right? Yeah. Okay. If it's legal, I'm in support of this in order to send the opinion to a lawyer first. So yes, I'm in support of this.
Okay. Commissioner Tolis, I see your hand is still up, but I'm assuming
that's from before.
Okay.
Take it down, sorry.
Okay. I think that Commissioner Gillis's motion represents a very interesting legal question. And one that I actually, because I'm a nerd, I would be interested in finding the answer to. But I don't know that I support the motion as I understand it, because I think it's unfair to businesses in the next 12 months versus, if you want to do this in month 13, all of a sudden you have extra access to parking that someone a month before you didn't. I sort of see that there might be some legal just hoops that I'm not sure we're able to actually jump through, because it interferes with the zoning process and the site plan review. And it just sort of seems like a different type of motion or a different type of ordinance. And, I'd be interested if there was support for this, maybe to pick that up in a separate agenda item or something like that. But at this point, I'm not supportive of the amendment, but I don't see any other hands up. And so I guess it would be appropriate to go to a vote on the amendment presented by Commissioner Gillis.
Okay. Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lalone,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
No.
And so the amendment to the motion passes 6-1.
Okay. And then, so at this point, I'd recognize Commissioner Tolis if you're still willing to make that motion to table.
Yes, I am, Mayor. And one other quick comment on that catering business that's there now. In order for them to open that up, they had to have required parking, which they have. And they, as Commissioner Gillis said, they've been existing at that location. And I'm saying you're just opening up a can of worms right now because there is no parking requirements. If you do this, then they move to the street and expand that, then I think we have a problem. So I'm still making the motion to table this and get the city attorney's opinion on this matter.
Okay. Commissioner Gillis?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to table and a second. Motions to table are not debatable, so we will go straight to a vote on the motion to table.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes. I support the motion to table.
okay. Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lalone,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
That motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Right, next on our agenda is another public hearing on Gursky Limited LLC, which owns Motorless Motion. And this is related to the Michigan Community Development Block Grant program that we initiated many years ago. And Mr. Gursky was able to take advantage of, I believe, earlier this year. So, Manager Ridley, would you like to give us a brief overview of the topic and the reason for the public hearing?
Yeah, the specific reason for the public hearing is that Mr. Gursky has exceeded his job requirements that were required under the loan. And so it's just an opportunity to obtain public input into meeting that criteria. And then after that public hearing, we would recommend that you authorize the mayor to sign any paperwork needed by the revolving loan fund.
Okay, I'll now open the public hearing. If you're with us in the meeting, you can go to the participants button and hit the raise hand feature, or you can hit number 9 on your phone if you're with us by your phone. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands up in the raise hand feature, and me and Drew can. Do you have any emailed comments?
Yes, sir. No, there weren't any.
Okay. Well, then I will close the public hearing and recognize Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the required documentation as part of the CDBG hyphen RLF program for Gursky Limited LLC.
Commissioner Ronan?
I second that motion.
Okay. And for discussion, Commissioner Alsager?
I raised my hand to do a second, so I don't have a comment at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Gillis?
Yes. Do we know how many jobs exceeded what they were supposed to? I mean, was it they were supposed to create or one, or I can't quite remember.
I see that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't recall off the top of my head, so I've moved Bill into the meeting so that he can answer that question.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. There was a requirement that they create one low and moderate income job, and they exceeded that. It was 1.3 or 1.4. It was a position and a little bit more. So they did meet their requirement of one, and they exceeded it by slightly more than that.
You said like 1.3 or 1.4?
It was a percentage over one. Right off the top of my head, I don't recall exactly. It was more than one, but less than two.
Because it's based on actual hours worked.
Correct.
And so one would be 40 hours?
One would be a full-time equivalent position. So it was slightly more than that.
Okay. Yeah, about. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Director Merdeza. I just want to, I know that the climate for all retail is pretty rough out there in this country and obviously locally as well. I think it's great that Mike, if you know him, has been able to keep the bike shop open and do a really outstanding job to obviously exceed the requirement by the CDBG. And within retail, I know that bike shops are also not at the top of the list of success as well. And so really the work that Mike's doing is really great for our community, our downtown. And so I'm really happy to see his success. There's obviously, as we've seen all the letters recently about biking and mountain biking in Indian Pines Park, there is obviously a big, community in the area that, feels that bicycling is important in our community. And we talk about that when we talk about our transportation modes. And so obviously it's something that's important. And that's all I really have to say. And good job to Mike and his staff. So I don't see any other hands up. And so I believe we can just go to a roll call vote.
Okay. Commissioner Tolis.
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager.
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis.
Yes.
Commissioner Lalone.
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
Yes.
And Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Okay. Next on our agenda is our only bid tonight. It's item number 14, which is the environmental consulting services groundwater testing. This, if you recall, is the topic that we discussed a few weeks ago and put out for an open bid. Manager Ridley, if you had give a little more overview for our topic for discussion.
Yes, as you indicated, we sent it out for bid as was requested by the City Commission. And as you can see from Director Moore's memo, we had 8 respondents. And based on our purchasing policy, a professional services contract like this is evaluated not just on price, but on a quality-based selection process, which takes into consideration the qualifications of the firm, their relevant experience, and their proposed work plan. So we had a team of 3 staff members who reviewed all of the proposals that were received based on those criteria, and each independently ranked them on each of the 4 criteria. And then the evaluations were commingled together, And the group, the highest scoring group was for the Manic Smith group out of Lansing that met all of those quality-based selection areas according to the review committee. So we're recommending a not to exceed contract with the Manic Smith group for $24,870. And as mentioned in the memo, that's just about $900 more than the tribal 2% funds we received for this project. So we're recommending a small budget amendment to cover that $900 amount.
Commissioner Elsager?
I will make the motion. I move to approve the contract with the Manic Smith Group for $27,870 for the groundwater testing near the former city landfill and the appropriate budget amendment.
Okay. Vice Mayor Perschbacher. We couldn't hear you, Amy.
I will second that. I second that.
Thank you. Commissioner Tolis.
I need a point of clarification here. I thought that item 14 and 15 were removed.
They were removed from the consent calendar. So you're taking individual action on them.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gillis.
Just a clarification. Commissioner Alsager, did you say 24 or 27,000? I think it's 24.
Yeah, I read it on the note, 24,000.
Okay, yes, thank you. My concern is I'm glad that we sent this out for bid and that we had several environmental consultants respond to our FPs. I'm a little concerned about us not taking one of the lower bids. This is more of the middle of the road or the middle range of some of the quotes or the costs. It ranged from $11,635 from someone from Vesterberg, Lakeshore, and Environmental, all the way up to Professional Service Industries of $37,000. So that was quite the range. And I know that we're going through to the middle of the road, but I am concerned that we're not taking lowest bid. So I'm hoping that the qualifications and the criteria that our staff used to evaluate this was sufficient. And my concerns, as I said before, Chippewa River has been a homestead of mine since I was born and raised here. I have seen the Chippewa River decline, and I've seen it, if you've ever floated down the river, as soon as you come into Mount Pleasant, past Chippewa's Park, the contents of the river and the look and smell of the river completely change. I would invite any of you commissioners to try to take a trip down the river just to see what you're dealing with as you come into Mount Pleasant. And if you were so inclined to do canoe or boat by the Superfund site. But that is my concerns, that right upriver, less than a quarter mile, we have had a Superfund site, one of the largest in the United States. And the overflow from that Superfund site before we put the slurry wall in, and even since we put the slurry wall in during our floods that could contaminate the area downstream, I'm concerned about the testing results only reflecting what is in our current parcel where our old dump was, and not what's coming from upstream or even farther upstream from that. So that's my concerns. So thank you.
Commissioner Tolis.
Quick couple of points, Mayor. I see on here we had Michigan Consulting and Environmental out of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, local environmental company at $18,510 that have done work for the city before in the tank removal. I was just wondering why we're not viewing their bid. Also, I thought when we discussed this the last time, we were gonna put some of this out for a bid, and we're gonna have other environmental companies review what we've already done and see what their take was on this. And I see we just put out exactly what AKT had bid out before, and we're testing groundwater again, which we don't have any wells under the DEQ records within 1 mile of that. I don't understand what we did here. We just took the bid and then just bid it out to everybody, or did we get any input, or do we have other companies come in here and review what we've already done or inspect the site? I'm not totally understanding that.
Let me take a stab at it, Jason, and then you can add to, since you actually wrote the bid documents. First of all, in relation to your first question, Commissioner Tolis, Michigan Consulting and Environmental's bid was thoroughly reviewed, and it was reviewed against all the same criteria that all of the other bids were reviewed against. And then what was sent out did include an explanation of the previous work that had been done and the information that we had received from Eagle thus far. But at that point, Jason, I'm going to bounce it to you to go further into what we asked for.
Yeah, what we asked for has essentially been vetted by Eagle. That's what they're looking for as a next step in this process. And so that's why we put the RFP out that way, because that's what both Eagle and we've been working with the tribe to make sure that we're doing what they're looking for as well, since they are footing most of the bill, almost all of the bill on this. So.
I understand that, Jason, and you keep referring to what Eagle wants. Why would Eagle want you to test the groundwater there when there is no potable wells that are using water out of a well? It's all coming from the city system. You can eliminate this whole step. I think further off, going right to the Chippewa River, as I mentioned the first time around, and drilling 6 or 7 monitor wells right at the bank right there, and see if we have anything there, if there's any contamination there. I mean,
and that's pretty much what we're doing. Yep, we're putting the wells right next to the river there along the west side.
Well, in here it says contract for $24,870 for the groundwater testing near the former city landfill. It doesn't say you're drilling wells along the Chippewa River.
Yes, that's part of it.
Are we still doing the 17 groundwater wells?
There's not 17 in this bid. There's, I think, 6 and 3, if I remember right. The majority are going to be along the west side there, as close to the river as practicable. And then I think 3 or 4 wells north, where there's a low area on the property. And that is to verify or determine whether or not there's interface between the contaminants of concern that were found on the site and the groundwater as it comes into the river and into that low area. And also part of this bid was to verify that statement that you made earlier, that there are no groundwater wells that are at concern, that there's no drinking water wells being used in the area.
So in other words, we're doing 9 test wells for almost $25,000.
Verify that. Yes, that's correct. Along with all of the testing that's involved with that report preparation and that verification of the water supply well records in the area.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the other bid was 7 wells along the Chippewa River and 17 down to the groundwater with AKT.
The others that we have done have been closer to the deposition area or within the deposition area of the former landfill. These will be much closer to the water's edge. And so that's the difference in these wells.
I don't know. I'd like to see more data here of what everybody bid. Did everybody bid apples to apples, or did the other companies come in and give you an opinion of this is what's needed and we need to do what's needed and we don't have to do extra items? I can't see the difference, between Michigan Consulting, a local company, and them. You got a $6,000 difference.
Yeah, the panel took all of those categories into consideration that I mentioned in the memo. The prior projects that are like this one, the professional qualifications, the price is also a factor, and that's where the scores landed. They were pretty close, to be honest. The scores were quite close, but this is the process that we follow to determine the winner, and I think it's appropriate to do our standard process, I guess, and that's the most fair to the bidders that submitted proposals.
Let me ask you one other question, Jason, if I can. Out of these firms that we had bids, how many companies physically came to the site and reviewed the site and did an assessment of it?
Manette Smith was one, and Michigan's Consulting and Environmental also stopped out. Now, those are the ones that called me first and checked with me. I don't know if anybody showed up and checked it out on their own, but those two I know did, and of course AKT's got their history out there. So
actually, out of 8, we had 3 companies that actually came to assess the area.
As far as I know, yep.
And Jason, is it accurate to say that they all had the information from the prior reports that we had of the prior testing that had been done?
Yes, yeah, they had a tabulated report of all of the prior testing. They didn't have all of the information because that would have been maybe too much to put in the RFP, but they will, once we award, they will, AKT has indicated that they're perfectly willing to hand over that information, and that I should get the 2 project managers in contact with each other, and they'll be able to bring them up to speed.
But they did have all 8 of them had the testing results, right?
Yes, they had the same information.
And all of them submitted reports back to the city?
Proposals, yep.
They submitted proposals for the bid, but they didn't actually give you a written report on what their assessment was of what was done and what needs to be done. That's my question.
They, within the proposals, they give us a scope of work that the way they understand the project. And so that's one of the things that they're scored on as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I just don't want to drag this on anymore, but I just want to make sure what we're bidding is what we want to get, and what is the end game here is what I'm saying. You can't keep following the DEQ wants this and the DEQ wants that. The DEQ wants everything. They'll demand you to do everything. And I just wanted to see something in black and white, an assessment report from every company here that submitted something, what their view is of it. But you're telling me only 3 of the 8 even came here to assess what's going on, to look at it and give you their opinion of it. That's what I thought we were going to get, but I guess we didn't. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think those are all good questions to ask, and we got some good discussion. So thank you to Commissioner Toles and Director Moore. And I just want to clarify, I guess, for those listening, that one of those three firms that did come to the site is the Manick Smith Group, which is the recommendation coming from city staff. So, Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, I just noticed there was like a $6,000 difference between Manick and our local firm. And I know there was some kind of percentages or whatever. Do you know offhand what the major difference between a local firm from Mount Pleasant and the one from Lansing? I know we have some buffer, and I can't remember the percent of RFP that if our local firm were to bid over, we could still, instead of going with low bid, which I thought was our policy, that we could award it to a local person, even if it was higher than the local bid, if it was within so much percent, a couple thousand. But now we have the reversal. We have a local firm that is $6,000 less. Do you remember thinking anything particular about those two between Manick and our local firm that stood out, that made them, that you go with the Manick one? Not to put you on the, but just something, because of the large difference, and Michigan Consulting and Environmental has done work for us before. So just throwing it out there. If you really don't remember or can't recollect, because I know there was several of you on the evaluation, I understand.
Yeah, I can speak to my scoring of it and maybe a little bit to theirs. But I think the similar projects was one of the categories that there was a bit of a difference in. The scope of work. Manick Smith had Manick Smith actually kind of, they set the bar for most of these categories. Everybody else was a little bit less complete, I guess. So yeah, the fee of the proposal was they got points for that, but the other categories made up for that. So that's the way it landed. And like I say, they were not that far off, but yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
And in regard to your questions, Commissioner Gillis, about the local purchasing preference, you're right. When we look at price only, the local preference is, I believe it's 3% not to exceed. It's either $1,000 or $1,500. But I don't believe that Michigan Consulting and Environmental is actually in the city limits of Mount Pleasant. So that wouldn't have applied in their case anyway. I think they would have had the Isabella County local preference, which is lower than that. And I was trying to find it real quickly, but I can't put my hands on it for the Isabella County local preference.
Thank you, Nancy.
Chris?
Just to clarify what Nancy had, it's not a county preference, it's an in-state of Michigan preference, and it's 1% up to a maximum of $1,500.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Commissioner Elsager.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay. All right. Let's call the question. Is there, it looks like everyone has had a chance to speak. And so I think it's appropriate. We can call the question on the motion to approve the contract as recommended by city staff.
Okay, Commissioner Lalonde?
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan?
Yes.
Commissioner Toles?
No.
Commissioner Elsager?
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher?
Yes.
And Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Passes 6-1.
Next on our agenda is item number 15, which is to receive the proposed ordinance for the Mount Pleasant Housing Commission pilot or payment in lieu of taxes and the municipal services agreement, and to set the public hearing for October 12th, 2020. This is just to set the public hearing and to, at that time, to have public comment and to review the ordinance that is presented. Commissioner or Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I move to set the public hearing for October 12th, 2020 on the proposed pilot ordinance and municipal services agreement as presented.
And Commissioner Ronan.
Second that.
Okay. And I'll open up the floor for discussion. Commissioner Alsager. Mayor, you're
Sorry. I think based on our previous discussions that we came up with a really good proposal, and I'm very comfortable sending this on to a public hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner Alsager. Commissioner Gillis.
Yes, I just want to remind the public, this is one more pilot of several that we are giving to a parcel. This parcel has been, yes, off the tax rolls because it was owned by Community Mental Health. That by no means gives me any incentive to keep it off the tax roll and keep it off the tax roll entirely. Because the Housing Commission is going to be or expected to purchase it, because right as of yet, the Housing Commission has not purchased the property. They're trying to make sure they get this tax abatement first before they proceed. And I understand that. But I do have a problem with subsidizing housing and subsidizing housing for workforce people. I wish that we had more housing units that were in a more affordable range. I do believe our housing stock will be coming down and being more affordable because we have a glutton of housing that are not being occupied by CMU students. And so to accommodate that, landlords will have to reduce their rents to get people in their buildings. But my major point of contention is that we are not collecting the taxes that we can, and we can collect up to 10% of the way that the state has written for nonprofits. I think fiduciary duty is to collect that 10% and distribute it to all the taxing entities, not just the service fee that we are now, or what the motion is asking, to then collect money, a service fee of 5% just for the city of Mount Pleasant. We are not accommodating Commission on Aging. We are not accommodating our ICTC. Our school taxes are not being captured from this parcel. And of course, it's not full capture. I mean, it's not 100% taxed. It's only taxed on what shelter rents or the rents that they collect. People use the argument that every time we give a tax abatement or an exemption, our schools are still funded with the amount through the state of Lansing for what we just gave away. Well, when we tell someone you can keep your taxes, you don't have to put it in the city coffers. The portion of the school is then kept whole. But I want to remind taxpayers, the city of the Lansing legislatures don't have a tree to pick money from. We are then funding those taxes or that monies for schools because another parcel isn't. So the funding is now, got hit twice. We not only pay our parcel that we live on taxes to the school, we pay someone else's part of their taxes that they should be paying for the school. So know that all that money that is intended to fulfill that gap actually comes right from our pockets. So I'm concerned that after 5 years, they're going to be asking for an extension. And the last thing I want to say about this, if we as citizens and community members expected employers to pay a living wage, we would not have to be subsidizing housing. If employers were to pay their employees a living wage, we would not be having this catch-22, where then not only are we subsidizing low-income people for their housing needs, we are now subsidizing workforce people for their housing needs, because that expense does not lie within the employers. So I appreciate your time listening to me, commissioners. Thank you.
All very good topics for discussion. Commissioner Ronan.
I forgot to take my hand down. I apologize.
Okay, all right. With no other hands up, I think it's appropriate to just go to a roll call vote on setting the public hearing for October 12th.
Okay. Commissioner Gillis,
No.
Commissioner Lalone,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
No.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Passes 5-2.
Okay, next on our agenda is to prioritize our city request for the fall 2020 tribal 2% grant request. So, Chris, I'll let you start the process, and at this point, we'll commissioners will just list their top 5, and then a memo will be drafted by staff and sent to the tribal council.
Okay. Commissioner Elsager.
Thank you. As I looked through them, I paid a lot of attention to the ones that the various departments noted as being critical. And so those 5 that were noted as critical are my 5 selections.
Commissioner Gillis.
Yes. My number 1 choice is no fee brush chipping program for $30,000. It's on the critical priority. That has been a success for the last 3 years and will be again this week. So I appreciate staff and Public Works for making that happen. My next selection is the aerial fire apparatus purchase for $500,000, and that's a high priority. Third is East Digester rehabilitation for $140,000, and that's also a critical priority. Island Complex generator replacement for $125,000, that's a high priority. And the retention basin for $100,000, and that also is a critical priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lalone.
In order, aerial fire apparatus, reservoir bypass, retention basin, East Digester, and brush pickup.
Commissioner Ronan.
I'd go with the aerial fire apparatus, the drinking water reservoir bypass, the East Digester rehabilitation, no fee brush chipping, and the retention basin. And those are not in any particular order. I mean, I'm not, can we argue against something? But I mean, I'm concerned that the Mid-Michigan Investigative Narcotics team is on here. It's a repetitive expense. And I think if we're going to do something like that, I'd rather see a treatment base as opposed to arresting people. we've got over 25 people in jail right now with substance abuse issues. We've got 61% of the inmates who haven't had a sentencing yet. Just highly, this reminds me of the 90s or something. I mean, I hope we're moving beyond that. So, but I apologize for my diatribe.
Commissioner Tolis?
Yeah, I'd like to make one quick comment concerning the drugs and the, I see in the report that was in my packet that opiate seizures are up 340% and meth is up 200-some% increase. My first pick is Mid-Michigan Investigative Narcotic Team, #1. #2 is 800 MHZ radios. #3, Drinking Water Reservoir Bypass. #4, East Digester. And #5, Fire Apparatus.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I'm going to choose the aerial fire apparatus purchase, the drinking water reservoir bypass, the East Digester, the no-fee brush pickup, and the retention basin.
And Mayor Joseph?
Sure. In, I guess, in no particular order, the 1 milligram or the 1 million gallon drinking water reservoir bypass, the East Digester rehabilitation, the retention basin, the island complex generator replacement, and the 800 MHZ radios.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. At this point, I believe we are at our public announcements on city-related issues and new business. I know Manager Ridley had a couple things she wanted to say, and so if you'd like to start us off.
Yes, I was just going to follow up on Commissioner Alsager's comment of earlier about Halloween and trick-or-treating. Like you, we've been receiving an increasing number of inquiries about Halloween and trick-or-treating. And I guess I would start out by saying that actually Halloween is a holiday. It's not a city event. And trick-or-treating has really never been a city event either. Traditionally, the city has set recommended hours for trick-or-treating. But the only reason we've been involved with that is to increase pedestrian and vehicular safety. So what we're recommending is that we not, again this year, it not be a city endorsed event. We're recommending that residents follow and adhere to both the CDC and the health department recommendations and guidelines. And currently the CDC guidelines indicate that trick-or-treating is a high risk activity, and the state health department has issued additional guidance on what they believe should be done safely in regard to trick-or-treating and Halloween. So we view this as a personal choice for both the recipients and for the individuals who choose to give out candy. But we recommend that all individuals review the CDC guidelines and the state health department guidelines and recommendations and adhere to those to the extent that they can. And we're prepared to provide a press release later this week that provides direct links to those so that residents have ready access to what's being recommended by the health officials in regard to trick-or-treating. So having said all that about trick-or-treating, a city event that we have sponsored in the past is the Downtown Pumpkin Promenade. And this year we will not be sponsoring that event. We don't feel it can be done safely under the guidelines. So we will not have a city sponsored event downtown for the Pumpkin Promenade. So those are the two things that I thought you were starting to get a number of questions about, and that's what we're recommending. We tell our residents in regard to inquiries in regard to that. And that was all I had for this evening, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Manager Ridley. I just wanted to, again, remind the public that the census deadline is September 30th. So you have the rest of today, tomorrow, and the following day to fill out your census. before we hit the deadline. It's very important for millions of dollars for local funding and our representation in Congress. I just wanted to also remind the public that absentee voting has started. The city has mailed over 3,400 ballots to people who have signed up, and you can request one up into Election Day and also register to vote up until Election Day, which is November 3rd. And the city has a drop box outside City Hall, and also you can put it in the mail. But if you choose to put it in the mail, make sure you give it adequate time.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. You reminded me of it. There
Sure.
was a court ruling in regard to the census late last week about maybe having the response date be pushed back to October 31st again. When we had conversations with the Census Bureau on Friday, they were still reviewing the court ruling and had not issued any guidance to us about that, what that may or may not mean to us and to the rest of the nation for that matter. So we're still waiting to hear what may be happening about the official deadline date. So as soon as we hear something, we will let you know and we'll send something out to the public. But at this point, we don't have any clear direction.
Okay.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
No, but that's a good clarification. But I would
Still good
encourage,
to get it done as soon as possible.
right, yes. And then also, I think Commissioner Gillis mentioned earlier in our meeting, no fee brush pickup is happening this week. And so don't call code enforcement if your neighbor has half a tree laying in the front yard, because the city is coming to take care of it this week. And just a quick reminder for everyone to be safe, wear your mask, and hope to see you soon. So. Commissioner Gillis.
Yes, thank you. Also, for information on candidates, you can go to vote411.org and read up links to their platform and what and why they are running. Also want to encourage people to do the census. Was going to wear my shirt tonight and I had forgot. So, but please fill out the census. The 30-day extension, I'm sure, will impact us all. And thank goodness we have that extension because to close the census early was a really foolish idea. And it's hard enough to collect all that information, let alone close it 30 days early. So, but I'm glad that they're deciding to continue that for the next 30 days. Also, the census are hiring enumerators. You can do it online. I think it's $22 an hour. So if you're looking for a part-time position that will only last you for another month, and while the weather is good, that is a great alternative to put some extra money in your pocket. I also want to encourage people to apply for our boards and commissions. I looked for the link because we used to have it right on the front page with vacancies, but I wasn't able to find it. So I'm on the board and commission roster, but I will at least let you guys, the commission or the community know we are looking for a position for a person for the building authority. We are also looking for a person for the city CMU student liaison committee. This would be a Mount Pleasant business representative. If you're interested in that, you can find the application at mountpleasant.org under boards and commission. We also have a vacancy in the historic district commission. So I'm sure that can apply to a lot of people here in historical Mount Pleasant. And we have a vacancy on the Isabella County Material Recovering Facility Governing Board, which is the recycling board. We would love to have someone who is interested in helping our community fill that need. Last is the Local Officers Compensation Commission. That's about the easiest commission you could join because it only meets about every 5 years. So if you have that amount of time, we would love to see that application. And forgive me, there is one more, the Tax Increment Finance Authority. That would be for our downtown businesses, and there also is a vacancy there. I would like to ask staff and our downtown development personnel to look into a change of the meeting time in that tax increment finance authority committee. They meet first thing in the morning at 8:30, and sometimes it goes to 10 or 10:30. It can go from getting out at 9 to getting out 2 hours later. That eliminates a lot of people that would like to join that board and be on that board, but they have to go to work at 9, or they can only be a half hour late. But it has eliminated a lot of people that have been appointed to that board, because you never know how long that meeting is going to last. I have mentioned this before, couple years ago, about the inconvenience of that time, and I would really like to see that board being trying to change their meeting time to accommodate more people that have to work 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, so they're allowed to participate in that tax increment finance authority board for the downtown. So if you could please just see if staff would be interested in trying to accommodate more people that would love to be on the board and would have loved to stay on that board, but had to resign because of the meeting time at 8:30 in the morning, when most of us have to be at work. So, okay, I appreciate all the community members doing what they can for wearing masks and social distancing. Keep up the good work, and hopefully we can beat this pandemic together. Thank you.
Don't see any other hands up, and so I'll open up our public comment on city-related issues. And if you're with us, I'll just remind you to use the raise hand function or hit 9 on your telephone. Manager Ridley, did you have any emailed comments to the commission?
No, there have been none.
Okay. I don't see any hands coming up, so I will close the public comment section for tonight. And I think it would be appropriate for us to take about a 5-minute recess and then reconvene for our work session, and our work session will have a presentation on the 2021 operating budget, and then we will be discussing property maintenance ordinance. Thank you.
Is it true that we're just staying here? We're staying in the same place?
Yes, we'll be in the same meeting, Commissioner Ronan.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
What's that? No, I'm off to the side now.
Okay. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. I think we can resume our meeting. About the well, first, getting ahead of myself. First, we have a presentation from Chris Saladin about the operating budget. And so, Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, I've prepared a brief, high overview of the 2021 proposed budget. Tonight's presentation is going to be a high-level overview of the proposed 2021 operating budget. We'll provide a little bit more in-depth information on the general fund, as well as cover some of the major items from our other funds. I would like to call attention to our strategic initiatives on pages Roman numeral 6 through Roman numeral 7.
These pages illustrate the progress we're planning on making in 2021 towards our 9 vision statements. If someone from the public asked me for the Cliff Note version of the budget, if they didn't want all the numbers and detailed narratives, I would direct them to these pages that detail most of the major activities that are planned for 2021. Here's a look at the total expected expenses across all funds for 2021. As a brief reminder of what our funds or buckets of money are used for, our general fund is expected to be $13.3 million and is for the general operations of the city. Our special revenue funds are expected to be $4 million and consist of more restricted revenue sources. So this is Act 51 street funding, special assessment of the principal shopping districts, and those types of activities. Our capital improvement millage is a 1.5 mil dedicated millage for capital improvement projects, and we're projecting that's going to be $356,500 after our projects were reprioritized during the capital improvement process. Our debt service is a 0.5 voter approved mill for bonding the board and building rehab. Our component units are expected to be just over $760,000, and these funds include things like TIFA, LDFA, DDA, EDC, the whole alphabet soup. Our enterprise funds are anticipated to be around $6.6 million, with the majority of that being in water, wastewater, solid waste. And our internal service funds are expected to be around $4.3 million, and these funds cover our motor pool and our insurance, both health and liability, since we're self-funded. And now getting into some of the detail on the general fund. As you can see from the chart, property taxes and funding from state shared revenue make up about 70% of our expected $13.6 million in revenue. Looking at some of the key assumptions for 2021 general fund revenue, this budget was built assuming a flat taxable value from 2020. So our property taxes are our single largest source of revenue. And right now we don't have enough information on how COVID's going to impact everything to have a more educated number for 2021. So we're assuming that 2021 property tax revenue is going to be equal to 2020. It's also worth pointing out that this is the second year that we're anticipating getting full fire funding from the state for fire protection for state facilities. That's a little over $300,000, and that's really key for us balancing our budget. Lastly, one of the big pieces to our general fund revenue is the state shared revenue dropped this year because of COVID around $230,000 for 2020. And right now, based on updated state projections, we anticipate no growth or reduction of state shared revenue in 2021. The proposed 2021 budget is modeled on keeping the millage rate flat at 16.25 mils for 2021. And just as a FYI for any newer commissioners and anybody watching at home, our millage rate has been unchanged since 2014. General fund expenses are expected to be $13.3 million. The majority of those costs in compensation and benefits, since we're primarily a service organization. So this chart shows a breakdown of the $13.3 million by division, and we actually adopt our general fund budget by division. Our public safety budget, which is police, fire, records, code enforcement, is 54% of the budget. Our community services accounts for 20% of the budget, and this includes activities like parks, planning, economic development. Finance is at 11%, and that's everything from IT, the treasurer counter, public relations, the clerk's department. Legislative is 8%, and that's city manager's office, city commission, human resources, and public works is our public works administrative team. It's streetlights, it's sidewalks, snow plowing. Our projected 2021 general fund expenditures are mostly unchanged for our 2021 operations. Because of the many economic unknowns posed by COVID-19, the City Commission prioritized the most critical infrastructure projects for 2021, and we postponed the rest of them until 2022, at which time they'll be reprioritized with our other future year projects. By the time that we do the reprioritization, we should have input from the updated, approved master plan. We're only anticipating one election for 2021, and we're also increasing the amount of sidewalk replacements from $100,000 to $150,000 for 2021 based on condition assessment and our complaint locations. So all that being said on the general fund revenue expenditures, now for the good news. We're projecting to have a balanced general fund budget for 2021 that does not require us to use fund balance to close any deficits. We anticipate adding $85,500 to the unassigned fund balance by the end of 2021. This leaves us with approximately $3.8 million at the end of 2021 in our unassigned fund balance, which is 28.3% of expenditures, which is in compliance with the City Commission policy that says we have to have at least 15% of expenditures on hand. Some key takeaways for our assigned fund balance is staff is recommending placing an additional $100,000 in the fire truck reserve, and that's in addition to the normal $60,000 we set aside every year. We have some large equipment purchases coming up in a few years out, and the more funding we can set aside, the less we would potentially have to finance. At the end of 2021, we are projecting we'll have $789,320 available for economic initiatives. Additionally, the state of Michigan allowed us to defer our 2020 and 2021 Eagle loan payments, which were used for the Mount Pleasant Center cleanup. We recommend placing these amounts in the assigned fund balance to allow for maximum flexibility for future budgets. For local streets, we have 5 overlays as well as reconstructing Gaylord Street with a new sidewalk. And in major streets, we have no planned reconstructions or overlays. As I mentioned in one of my previous slides, earlier this year when we put together our 2021 through 2026 capital improvement plan, we had just finished that plan when COVID really took over, and we, through the process of a couple of work sessions, the City Commission made the decision only to proceed with our most critical infrastructure needs, and these are a listing of the projects that met those requirements of either they can't wait or it's not a good idea to postpone them past 2021. Taking a look at some of our other funds, we are anticipating wrapping up the tree abatement project at the airport in 2021. In order to make landings as safe as possible, this is the second year we're planning on having a deer call at the airport. Right now at the wastewater plant, we're having an engineering study done to determine the best way forward for the wastewater treatment process. We're looking at the plant's capacity, age, and possible future Eagle requirements to see if it makes more sense to keep doing the projects one at a time, or if it makes sense to group the larger projects together and issue bonds. For solid waste, we're planning on having 2 no-fee brush pickups, as has been our practice the past few years. In 2021, the LDFA capture rate goes to 0, and because the contracts were reduced, the plan is to pay those out from fund balance over the next 5 years. For Tifa, we're going to be reconstructing parking lots number 6 and number 8, as well as working on the design for Town Center or parking lot 3. And we'll begin the process in 2021 of figuring out what the best design is for that space. We have continued to look at our fees under the updated City Commission fee policy that services and programs that primarily benefit one property owner or user should be covered by fees if the user of the service or program generally has a choice or option whether or not to use the service. Over the past couple of years, we've brought many fee changes to the Commission as part of the budget process. We're probably getting to the end of this being an annual practice, as the fees that we're now bringing forward are not utilized very often, and we do not know of any additional fees that we're going to recommend in the future. Staff will continue to monitor fees with future budgets to make sure that we do not get too far out of alignment, ensuring that fees are adequate to cover costs for activities that should be covered according to our fee policy. In the appendices of your budget book, you'll see in the back that there is a rate study for both water and sewer. And what we do is we basically look at our operational costs, our capital costs. what revenues we expect to generate, and then we use that to try to figure out, okay, can we leave rates the same? Do we need to increase rates? Just what's the whole picture looking like? For 2021, we're recommending an increase of approximately 58 cents per month for water and 17 cents per month for sewer for the average residential household. So grand total, that adds up to 75 cents per month per household on average. As been our past practice, we've also looked to see how our rates compare with our neighbors in surrounding communities. One of the most important unknowns for the 2021 operating budget is the state of Michigan's budget. Because we have different fiscal years in the state, there's always the possibility that our state shared revenue, our full funding for fire protection, all that sort of stuff could be at risk depending on what sort of impact that the COVID-19 outbreak has on the state's budget. It's also possible that priorities could shift in 2021 based on input from the final approved master plan. Our wastewater budget does not include any revenue or cost for treating sewage from Nottawa Township. We expect flows to begin at some point next year, but we do not have enough information on the timing or how much flow we're going to be treating in 2021 to include in our budget. So the next steps to keep the budget process moving along, we have work sessions scheduled for October 12th, October 26th, a public hearing on November 9th, and an additional work session on November 23rd if needed. Normally for the first work session, staff will have topics that we want to get additional city commission input on. However, between delaying many of the capital projects and a mostly status quo budget, we do not have any specific topics identified for our October 12th work session. If commissioners have specific topics they want to discuss as they relate to the budget, please let Manager Ridley know by October 2nd. If commissioners have questions on the proposed budget, so maybe not a complete topic, but maybe something more like, what's this number? What does this mean? Just clarification, that sort of thing. Please have those questions to City Manager Ridley by October 12th. And just as a reminder, the charter requires that we adopt the budget by the last meeting of the year.
Thanks, Chris, for that presentation. Are there any quick questions on the presentation? Commissioner Elsager?
Mine is not a question, but just a thank you for a very well done presentation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tolis?
Chris, one quick question. The state shared revenue drop, is that 230,000? That's what we're going to lose?
Correct. So for that, it's for 2020. And basically for 2021, what their projections are showing is it might go up a few $1,000s, but I said it was flat because when you're talking about $3 million, change that's a few $1,000s is, rounds off to zero. So that's what the state's most updated projections are showing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks again, Chris. And just a reminder for everyone to get their questions, their larger topics in by October 2nd and the more targeted questions by October 12th. And so a second part of our work session tonight is discuss the potential property maintenance ordinance, and everyone in their packet got a rough draft of that. Some of our commissioners, I know Commissioner Elsager and Commissioner Ronan, this is their first year. And so a little bit of background, I guess, from my perspective is we had a bigger discussion about this last year, and it was a bigger ordinance with a lot of different things in it. And this is the much more scaled down version in front of us that I think staff felt was more appropriate given our current economic situation. But I want to hand it over really to Manager Ridley and others to sort of maybe talk about, just give us an overview And then we can kind of get into our discussion after.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to what you said, Mayor, is that the prior ordinance that we had drafted and discussed in work session did go much further. It looked at painting that may need to be done, replacing windows, roof repairs, and some shutters and porches. And so it got into some fairly high cost items. And so the concerns that we heard were, one was the affordability of some houses being able to do those upgrades. And secondly, it just felt like a bit of an overreach initially. So this pared down version focuses more on issues that are lower cost. Well, let me back up. The other good news is because we got the neighborhood enhancement grant and allocated additional funds towards that granting process this year, as you know, there's $90,000 available now to applicants that can deal with some of those larger cost issues. So we're anxious to see the kind of impact that has before we talk about having to maybe add that to an ordinance. So when we put this one together, we focused on items that tend to be more lower cost in nature, more like graffiti based, trash based, those kinds of things that are probably less expensive to take care of, but have certainly a, if taken care of, would have a positive impact on the neighborhood in general. And so this is really a pared down version that focuses on those type of activities. And so what we're looking for is any questions you may have on that tonight, and ultimately whether you have any interest in pursuing this as an actual introduction of the ordinance and scheduling a public hearing on it. So we're looking for your questions and then your guidance before the end of the evening. And both Doug Lobsinger and Paul are here. They were heavily involved in the drafting of this pared down version.
Hi, Doug. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Thanks for being here tonight. Commissioner Ronan, I see your hand up.
I just, I'm unmuted. Good. I just want to, I'm really thrilled. I think this is a great approach. One question I have is, I assume the code enforcer is the person most knowledgeable about some of these things, right? Has there ever been a focus on having that person, you know, we have this free chipping type thing. I mean, so could we give some of those free chipping tickets or whatever they are to like a code enforcer? So he goes out and he says, oh, this building needs to be brush cleared or something, and they're very poor. I don't know, give him one of those free chipping things. Or, I mean, is there any way to sort of, you know, some of the high schools in the area, the kids are required to do public service stuff. And I can tell you, they're oftentimes looking for projects to do. Some of the fraternities on campus, the kids are looking for projects to do. Is there any way to sort of make this into obviously I want someone else to do all the work, right? That's what I'm saying. But I don't want to do it. But I mean, is there some way, I mean, it's just that the fee of $500 seems a lot. I'm in favor of it 100%. Don't get me wrong, but the fee of $500 seems a lot. But if there's some coordination, I mean, this could become a wonderful tool for the community, I think. Anyway, I'm done.
So as far as the brush chipping, yeah, our code enforcement officers do offer those kinds of services, the city services to residents when they run across that. So that does take place currently. As far as working with CMU groups to help in some of those instances, I think I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, we've had some mixed success with that. We've had really good success in the Greeks Clean the Streets because it's just a one-day type event. But in other instances where we've tried to set up ongoing things, especially where it goes on individuals' private property, it becomes a little bit more difficult to appropriately manage those volunteers on private property. So we haven't pursued that as much.
I like it.
Hey, Doug, I don't think we can hear you.
You're unmuted, Doug, but your microphone's not working.
I know what he was going to say, though. He was going to agree with Manager Ridley that we've had some mixed success, that the time commitment that typically entails with, like in Commissioner Ronan's example of the brush chipping and whatnot, that may be a little bit more problematic. That doesn't mean that we can't try to do something and do it much like we did this ordinance. Instead of trying to bite off a whole bunch, focus on one place and see what kind of success we have, see what it entails, and try it.
Thanks, Paul. Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I'm always into helping the community to help themselves. Definitely getting volunteers, maybe putting together a program. I think I brought this up many times before. The individuals that actually, the majority of individuals that use the free chipping are the ones that could actually afford the fee to get their stuff chipped, because they're the ones that are more active in the community, knowing what's happening at the city level. I would like to see us, if we're going to put something together like this, this blight ordinance, that we offer opportunities for people to do something good. Because where are we going to show these, where are we going to concentrate on this blight ordinance? Is it going to be something where the code enforcer is going to drive around? Is it going to be neighbors that are, picking about somebody's, tree that's overgrown, or, or a bush that's in their way now, or something like that? How are we going to regulate this? How is that going to work?
Paul, do you want to address that?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is.
We can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yeah.
Good, modern technology. I'm sorry. I used this earlier today and it worked fine, but we're probably going to have to set zones up in the city, different zoning areas, different areas that we would feel that are in the greatest need. And that's kind of reason why we wanted to start small. Is if we start big, it's going to be very labor intensive. And we want to try to do this in a manner in which we can manage it effectively. So a lot of it may be zoned. We may pick to start in one side of town or one section of town and kind of hit the more important properties, move to the next section.
And just to add on that, Commissioner Perschbacher, is we would also do the educational route too. It isn't right to the ticket. It isn't do it now, or there. We have a long practice of working with people to try to get the desired outcome, and along that is the assistance and whatnot if needed. So it isn't what I would call immediate justice, so to speak. It's a very toned down approach to get the outcome that is desired.
And Paul, isn't it accurate to say on most of these things, we educate and then we first issue what we call a correction notice and give a certain period of time for it to be corrected. And then if that doesn't occur, then we move into the civil infraction penalty. So it's a phased approach. We educate, correction notice, and then move to civil infraction if it doesn't get taken care of in the agreed upon time period.
That's correct. And Assistant Fire Chief Lobsinger would be able to, I guarantee you, they issue more corrections notices than they do tickets.
Absolutely. Part of the educating is also helping them identify what the problem is, and can we come up with some other solution? Is there a group that we could contact that could help them? It might be getting some community service. It might be hooking up with a university, the university in some fashion, those sorts of things. Hats. There's a lot of different organizations out there that we try to work with to solve the problems.
Commissioner Gillis.
Yes, thank you. I am really happy to see this finally come to fruition, even the scaled down version as it is. Hold on, I've got some notes in here, but I'm on the wrong packet. My concerns are just some of the subsections. For instance, under the subsection junk, where any abandoned, discarded, unusable objects or equipment, objects being used are for unused for its original intended purpose, but not limited to furniture and the such. Some people's tastes for art are different than others, and some people use like farm implements and stuff for decoration. They're using chairs to be turned into plant holders, and so that's my concern, that how are you going to differentiate what is junk and what is someone's art?
That can always be challenging when we approach some of our citizens like that. We try to educate them and maybe let them know why we're here. Maybe we had a complaint, and we always try to focus on trying to instill everybody to be a good neighbor, in that you may really appreciate this and it may have a lot of value to you. Maybe you're looking at or considering the viewpoint of a neighbor would be valuable as well. And I try to get all the parties together to talk about that so that we can come up with a solution without having to issue any citations. And that would be my goal here too.
And I know that, Officer Lobsinger, I know you'd go out of your way. But that was just one that struck me, because some people make, all sorts of, they reuse things, right? Recycle. And I'm one, and, so
that may be a piece of art. And maybe after we have the discussion, both parties feel a little bit differently about it. I find that's very common.
Okay, good.
And there's going to be some common sense, I guess, for the law enforcement officer in me is evidence. If there's a flower plant, there should be some dirt in it. There should be some remnants of a flower at some point, or a plant of some kind. So there's all those indicators that we can use, and the best one is our ears and our mouth, and talk and come to some sort of resolution.
Yes, thank you. And I also would like to see some clarification under the subsection G, trash and rubbish. Quick question. This will apply to homeowners and rental units, correct?
All properties,
Correct.
even commercial properties.
Okay.
Yes.
I believe that we should have some kind of graduated warning, maybe, and especially for trash. I have rental units in my neighborhood. One particular property has turnover, and even when they don't have turnover, continuously the tenants put garbage out, raccoons, wildlife, the such, pushes it over, garbage lands all over their front yards. It begins to blow down the street into everyone else's yard. This happens over and over and over and over again. And as code enforcement does their best and a wonderful job to reach out to them, the way it's written, they have so many days to clean it up, and 2 weeks later, the process starts again. And so I think to try to either get the landlords to make sure their tenants know that that is not appropriate behavior or acceptable behavior in a housing unit anywhere in Mount Pleasant. We need something that has a little more bite, where maybe a warning could be issued. And then if it happens again, they clean up the garbage. Their garbage can gets tipped over. There's garbage all over their yard. It's now down the road. It's in 3 or 4 neighbors' yards. They clean up their yard, but everybody else is still dealing with their garbage. And then they end up cleaning it up because code enforcement works wonderful to try to get compliance. Unfortunately, 2 weeks later, the same thing happens again. And a month later, it happens again. And so I think within a calendar year or with a 12-month session, that if something, it needs to be a progression of some kind of fine rather than continuously happening. And the people that live around this negligent person has to deal with it continuously. So if it was something like you get 2 warnings within a calendar year, and then by the 3rd time we're here to address the same violation, it's no longer a warning and you have 3 or 4 days to pick it up. It's a $50 fine. And then by the 4th one, maybe one as big as $500. Because I think money sometimes speaks louder than words, and mostly in landlord situation, landlords should make it clear to tenants that this isn't acceptable to have garbage or to have rubbish around their yards, or a whole bunch of tarps over a whole bunch of stuff in the yards. But I do have some concerns about the trash and rubbish portion not being more effective. And I think with someone who's a habitual offender and what they put the surrounding neighbors through, it needs to be tightened up a little bit. So there's some consequences that might impact their behavior.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, we have a separate ordinance for that now, in the process for dealing with that. In this one, we exclude the domestic refuse and anything for composting, and then list those other things. I mean, we can certainly look at that if that's the desire of the commission and whatnot. I understand your frustration, and you're right. The key is that when you go out there and you educate, and then you go out there and you give a warning, and then you go out there and you're still dealing with a kind of a broken system, it's time to take enforcement action. So we can certainly look at that.
Well,
I agree with the director there. I'm not sure this ordinance would be the tool to use for that. I think if we wanted to look at something else, it would be looking at 50.02, which is a solid waste ordinance. That's where they're giving that 6 days that Commissioner Gillis was talking about. When I relate to that, waste is one of our number one issues that we deal with in code enforcement.
Well, we can look at that 50.02 and see if there's a way to tighten that up, since this exempts that, so we can look at that piece of it.
Well, I would appreciate it, because I know, like I say, unfortunately, there is one right across the street from us. It is a continuous problem.
Yeah.
The resources that are being used from code enforcement at that one property is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, and so I feel bad because I call, because I don't need to be picking up other people's garbage. And there's other violations too. That's just the one that affects the other property owners around it. I mean, there's all sorts of other things going on. But so, yeah, I really think, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's dealing with this type of behavior. So I would like it, that would be at least something to for you as a the code enforcement crew to have a little bite, because we don't need to be spending so much resources there every couple of weeks. And it happens in dumpsters too. We have commercial units that don't, on a timely manner for the new commissioners. And there's been some complaints that Constant Refuge are falling out of the dumpsters. Until the business owner gets a complaint, then they dump it. But it literally overflows because they want to get more bang for their buck or something. I'm not quite sure. So thank you.
I had a question about the inoperable vehicle section. In there, it says the person would have 90 days to make their vehicle operable. If someone is facing, unfortunate financial situation, something like that, what is really what would you expect to be our actions in that sort of situation?
Well, those are always delicate. We try to be consistent. It all depends on where the inoperable car is and where it's not. If it's in the front of the house, if it's parked legally or not, if it's got air in the tires, if it runs, or is it an inoperable vehicle because it's not licensed? Those are all different issues that would take us down a little bit of a different road. If somebody has a vehicle that's not running, we're going to try to work with them, but there's going to be a certain point in time and we have to come up with a plan. And that's why the communication is real important in making that plan. Okay, when can you have this ready? When do you expect it to be ready? And is that something that we can work with or not? And then let's say that date comes and goes and we don't hear from them, they don't follow up, and we don't see any progress. Well, now that becomes an enforcement issue. Are we going to talk to that person again? Absolutely. Are we going to find out what happened? But that's where the consistency is real important for us to, if we are going to enforce that. Now, would we go outside of that 90 days? I'm not going to say no to that, but we try to make sure that our decisions are fair for everyone and that we're treating everybody the same. But we also try to be fair and work with them as well, as long as they're working with us.
Yeah. My feeling reading through this ordinance, when it comes to the trash and maybe the junk could be related, like those seems to be issues that could potentially have a public health hazard. Obviously you don't want trash building up in someone's yard. And a burnt out house obviously is a similar situation where there's I think the opportunity for something that could cost someone's health or life is more at risk than versus when we're talking about an inoperable vehicle or junk or a graffiti rather. And so I sort of see that some of those things are kind of treated similarly, and I would like to see maybe something where things that pose like a real health risk are treated more strictly versus do you have, graffiti versus or a vehicle that's got, a bad plate or a motor that's, not doing very well.
I would say that's the way we pretty much manage things now. If it's a life safety issue, it's at a much higher level. If it affects the safety of not only just the occupant, but the other occupants of the building or the neighborhood, then that's a different issue.
Right.
In the other way you have to look at it, or I would ask you to consider, is look at it from the standpoint of as that vehicle is sitting there and it's aging, it isn't getting better with age necessarily, and it has oil on board, it has gas in the tank, it has antifreeze. rubber tires and all that stuff deteriorates. Granted, it isn't over 90 days or anything like that. But what happens is then when it does come time, if there is a time to move that vehicle, the cost just skyrockets because now it's a real anchor to try to get moved. So I hear what you're saying, but there are other issues with the cars. And the last thing, and I don't know, it's probably not appropriate, but I'll give it a whirl and take the talking to tomorrow morning. That the house that caught on fire on the west side and then burned had a number of vehicles in the backyard that, grass is growing up in between them, dealing with that. Neighbors are looking at it. We're getting regular calls. And people, I live next to a junkyard and there's 3 or 4 cars there. Now that's a stretch, but that doesn't make it desirable to live next door to that either. But I completely hear what you're saying about a car versus multiple cars and whatnot.
Yeah. And I knew, I see your point. I think I, knew that sort of going in that a car can become, a health hazard, especially in an extreme situation where you have a fire or it's really deteriorating. But I guess, because the ordinance treats, some of these things is the same. And I guess, I trust that our code enforcement is doing a very good job of, trying to work with people, educating, giving them time and try to work to make them, get a plan together to take care of the issues. And, I've had conversations with Doug and Paul before, and, but I guess from a policymaker standpoint, like I, would feel more comfortable with some of that in writing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about the cars, but, I see graffiti as something that's kind of different. It needs to be taken care of, but not necessarily with the same level of swift action that you might treat a more dangerous situation. And so that's why I bring it up. But the other things that I really wanted to bring up are, I know earlier in the year we talked about, a community development block grant program, and the commission at the time was sort of supportive of using maybe that tool to help neighborhoods. And I wonder if there's been more research. I know we haven't talked about it since, but I know like something like that could be used to, help with houses that have these sorts of situations or other situations. And if you have any comments on that, I'd appreciate it. I did some looking around the past couple of days, and I think we're fortunate as a city to have, we don't have a lot of like vacant buildings and things like that, but obviously we don't want to let it slip into a situation where we're trying to save our tax base desperately. But the thing that always sticks with me when we talk about property maintenance is, how do we help people pay for it? Because often this is a tool that unfortunately sometimes targets people who have less resources. That's not always the case, because there are definitely examples of people who have the resources, but if we don't force them to do it, they're not going to do it. I saw that, there's some mentioning in some literature about neighborhood stabilization programs or pay for success sort of programs where you actually have like investors work with the city to front money for people. Or we already discussed a little bit like a sort of a community-based organization. They have like programs like that in Detroit. And those are the things that I'd really like to see, because one, it brings our community together, but also it takes the financial burden somewhat out of the equation when we want to enforce some of these things against people who, you know, are low on resources. And certainly we're a city where we definitely have a significant amount of our population that is sometimes strapped for cash. So
one thing that I hear and that I'd ask you to consider is just how important this first step of a property standards ordinance is, because we almost need to have the ordinance before we can go out and show the need to create and find some of those resources that you talked about, Mayor. I've spoken to some of the other cities that have enacted some of these policies, and they go back to the ordinance. We have to have the ordinance so that we can create and show the need to some of these community groups and to go into it. That's why I think this is an ideal time with our neighborhood improvement grant to try to work these together. That is something that I hope we're able to continue to expand this in a manageable way where we can improve our city as we go through this.
okay.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think we have talked about that previously, and it's always good to hear that again, to kind of get back to basics, because, you know, obviously it's the chicken and the egg. Sometimes you need to show the need to get the help. Sometimes the help and the need, you know, there's always going to be that gap period, right? And that's my concern.
And then you got to have, and I'm certainly not saying that any of you don't, but then you got to have trust in us to be able to apply it with empathy, but also having some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that Assistant Fire Chief Lobsinger, he's got a lot of empathy, and that's hugely important, especially when you talk about ordinances like this. So
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Doug. I'm going to let Commissioner Ronan have the floor here.
You know, I was chuckling at Laurie's comment. I remember as an undergraduate going to the Museum of Modern Art, and I'd have arguments with people for hours about, is it art or is it, I mean, and I think it's the same way with some of these objects, to be honest. I think, you know, what's junk, what's an inoperable vehicle? I have a tremendous amount of faith in code enforcement and law enforcement to make these types of decisions. I hope we don't spend time trying to get up specifically defining what each of these categories are, because it's sort of like a fool's errand. I mean, I think we pass it, and maybe Officer Lobsinger will come back to us in 6 months and say, hey, geez, we really need to tweak this way, or we need to, I'd love to see it move ahead. I don't know, a tough judgment call. But,
Commissioner Toles?
Yeah, a couple quick comments. I'm not really in favor of implementing more stuff on the citizens. You got a lot of people that are on fixed income, elderly that, just can't afford to do stuff. Where I agree with some of the commissioners, we should have some kind of volunteer stuff, or have the city implement other programs where you're picking up unwanted appliances maybe a couple times a year, picking up garbage and removing it. And we were talking about, Paul Loria and Doug were talking about vehicles. Well, I can give you an instance. I won't mention where it's at, but I won't give you an address, but there's a vehicle that's been in a driveway on Fancher Street for 5 years. And they just keep putting plates on it. It's behind a fence. It's never moved, and it's used for a storage shed. So how do you expect them to deal with that? I mean, I don't know, maybe we've got to do some incentives or something, get with Green's Towing and say, hey, we'll pay you so much, vehicle and you go to these people and pick up these unwanted vehicles and just junk them out, you know? I don't know, pay them $10, $20 a car just to get rid of them. But we've got to implement some programs. I think code enforcement does a good job. They drive around, and when they see something, you know, it's brought to their attention right away and it's taken care of. But I don't know. I don't have the answer to this, but
yeah,
you know, just like that van, what do you do there? It's been there for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's behind a fence and doesn't move. And it's a storage shed now, but they keep putting a plate on it. So what are you going to do? It's plated. So under the ordinance, you have to have a current plate on it. It's got to be registered, or it's abandoned and it's junk and it has to be hauled out. So I really don't have the answer, but I think implementing more things, I don't know if that's really going to cure the problem.
I can appreciate what you said, Commissioner, and that's why I think the Neighborhood Resource Unit is so important to the city. And there's so many aspects of it, and we sit and brainstorm and have so many different ideas. And our neighborhood associations are really important. We continually try to develop them so that they can, then they like to have projects to work on, just like that.
I just hate to make it a burdensome on people that are on a fixed income, that don't have the money to do it, that really would like to do it. And I've seen many cases of that where we've been called to accessory buildings, you know, that the city wants tore down, and we go talk to the people and they just don't have the money to do it. And I mean, they want to do it and comply, but I don't know if we can implement some city stuff or volunteer stuff like some of the commissioners said. But just like getting rid of appliances and this other stuff and abandoned cars.
You know, one of the difficult things is it's kind of, and I'm certainly not being critical, but maybe in the messaging, if people need help with that sort of stuff, before we knock on their door over it, it would be nice to know, you know, what their need is. So maybe there's some outreach that we can possibly look at or put together in regards to that. Because as soon as we knock on the door, you know, the anxiety skyrockets. It becomes tick-tock every day, and I understand that. But boy, it would be a lot more efficient if they could call or put something in and let us know the need.
I also think that if, let's say we got that vehicle cleaned up that you're referring to, if there's other things in the neighborhood, once neighbors see one neighbor taking care of their property better, it does give them an incentive to take care of theirs a little bit better. We've seen that with some of our projects. And but again, I think that's what's critical for us to move forward and try to find some of those organizations, is to have the ordinance that sets the requirement and shows the need, versus us creating an idea and trying to take it out once we have the ordinance so we can kind of justify where we're going with it.
Commissioner Gillis, I see your hands up.
Yes. I just wanted to make a comment and understand, Mayor Joseph, how you're setting precedents like a health hazard or something that's going to be a safe, have a safety hazard versus graffiti or abandoned vehicles. I want them both addressed. I would hate to have my neighbor have graffiti on their siding with some profanity or, whatever graffiti that we see downtown, and have to live with that because code enforcement is addressing more safety and hazardous issues. And excuse me, I know we've all heard the broken window theory. You know, you allow one broken window in a neighborhood and then another one shows up and it deteriorates. And we're actually working against that force here, trying to bring people up. And I've seen that because we have recently done something in our area, trimming bushes and stuff. And also both different homeowners on kitty corners from us have started working on their yards and looking into replacing siding and the such. So I know you pick up one person's property and it initiates a whole response down the line. But I do think abandoned cars and graffiti and trash is just as important. And from seeing the larger scale version, this is so much smaller. It is so limited to what we were looking at the first time that I think things like removing rubbish or garbage, that should be an automatic. Maybe it will entail giving them free large item tickets so that if you have a couch or something, you know, that you can put that out and we can sponsor that, or a group can sponsor that. And but I also know that we, even with passing, if we pass this scaled down version that is so small compared to what we were looking at before. And I've had several community members for several years ask us to look into this blight. When I first campaigned in 2015, I had people talking to me about passing a blight ordinance that far back. So know that it's been on community members' mind, and I'm glad we're moving forward with even a little bit of progression in the right direction. But I know this is going to entail a lot more work from code enforcement, and it may be that we have to look for more staff. We may have to look into financing or, you know, payrolling, part-time code enforcement. Remind me, do we have three code enforcement full-time?
We have two full-time code enforcement officers.
Okay. And then we put in for a grant once from someplace to have that third one for a while, right? We took it from the neighborhood resource unit or something. When we were working on south of High Street in that area.
Yeah, I think initially we did that when we were resetting all of the community expectations and so forth. I don't remember, Lori. I'd have to double check that. I don't remember off the top of my head how we paid for that and how long it lasted.
Okay. Well, because initially that might be something we could add to our code enforcement staff temporarily while we tackle this. And then, you know, as we move on into bigger and better things to improve the look and the feel and the community aspect. So, but I don't really expect two code enforcement people to fulfill the needs we have now and the new policy that we're enacting. I think we're putting a lot on those staff members. So.
Yeah, in again, I think it's you know, how do you eat an elephant? Kind of one bite at a time. And
that's kind of why we were thinking of doing an area of the city. Start this area, move to another area.
And I would think that the last thing we'd want to do on this is carpet bomb the entire city with correction notices. Now, granted, 3 code enforcement officers versus 2, it you know, you still probably can't do that, but we as staff and including myself, we can always request based on workload. That's always been the case, and go through the justification process, which it's very in depth. So I'm not I appreciate the concern, but I'm not necessarily concerned right out of the gate. If that answers your question.
Thank you. That's good to know. And you guys are on the front line. So, you know, that's my concern is how are you going to manage that?
Well,
That's-
and
so-
again, it's
Not
about
that I don't think you can. I mean, I totally
Yeah.
trust you, but
it's about expectation. If you expect, you know, to enact this and then within 30 days have everyone in compliance, I'm going to need more men or more people. But again, it's just incremental improvement.
Commissioner Elsager.
Thank you. I just thought it was time to weigh in a little bit that I appreciate all the discussion and I do appreciate hearing that our enforcement officials really believe this would be a good step to have an ordinance. You know, it gives them a little teeth to work with there. So I think this is a great idea. Hearing that it's a scaled down version perhaps makes it more workable and manageable. So I think it's a real good idea.
Pete, Commissioner Toles, did you
Yeah, I
have
just want to make one other quick comment. I think code enforcement does a good job. Our personnel of the city do a good job, but their hands are tied in some instances, just like the point I brought up about that vehicle. It's got a current plate on it, but it's been there for 5 years and it's a storage shed. Now, what do you expect? Code enforcement or Mr. Lapsinger or Mr. Loria, what can they do? I mean, you've got to educate people. You got to do something. And I think just like with our program to get rid of all these appliances and all the rest of the stuff, it went over gangbusters. I knew we did it during the summertime a few times, but then I don't think I'm mistaken, but I think it was just cost prohibitive. I think Greens volunteered a lot of time to do it. But if you did that for like a certain week, you know, the city could pay for part of it. Greens might donate some time, but you have other multiple scrappers that would be willing to pick this stuff up because that's how they make a living. Just put it out there. But most people don't have a vehicle to haul it or somewhere to haul it or pay to have it hauled. So, you know, if you allow them to put it out there for a week, Greens will pick it up, the scrappers will pick it up, you get rid of it, it's not a blight anymore, and everybody's happy. But I don't know, same with the abandoned vehicles. Just because you say it's not running, well, that van hasn't run in 5 years, and I guarantee you it probably won't run, but it's got a valid plate on it and it's used for a storage shed. So what are you going to do to that person? Throw them in jail? I just don't have the answer, but I think the city needs to implement some stuff like Mr. Loria was talking about. Send some stuff out and try to educate these people and try to help some of these people and see if you can help them with their needs. I think implementing more ordinances doesn't get it. It really doesn't. I can see Commissioner Gillis about the garbage and that other stuff. Yeah, that's a gimme. You know, code enforcement should be on them. They need to clean that up. But I mean, abandoned cars, abandoned appliances, refrigerators, and the rest of the stuff, you can implement it. The city can implement something a couple times a year during the summer, and you can get rid of all this excess stuff. I mean, that's my feeling on it. Thank you.
I got a question. Help me out, Nancy. It seems like one time we had something at the city that you could put everything out to your curb for free. Anything you wanted to give away?
Yeah, we had a program that we called Trade Your Treasures, and we would tell people to put it out and then encourage people to go pick it up if they wanted it for free. So we did that for a couple of years. And then we moved to the large item pickup after that.
And I know that anybody that's a dumpster diver or one of those kind of peoples or hoarders, I guess, you know, that was a field day for them. And a lot of people, but probably at this time and age and economy, would pick up stuff and maybe take it to, you know, recycle, metal recycler. I can't think of what they're called right now. But, and another thing, when we sell large item tickets for $15, does the city get that money and then we pay our garbage them to dump it?
Yes, that's what Republic charges us to dump it. So we're just a flow through agent for it is all.
Okay. Okay, so that might be an avenue if we were to have a resource to issue free large item tags for people that were in violation. Right.
Yeah. I think the challenge is kind of like what Commissioner or Vice Mayor Perschbacher said earlier, is identifying who can afford to do it versus who is choosing not to do it. And a lot of times if you have free programs, the people who can afford to do it take advantage of the free program. And so I think that's the hard part, is sorting that out.
So we could always put a proof of income or proof of salary, you know, W-2 form, to see if you were behind 80% median income, just like we did the pilot. And if you're 80% below the median income, you can get, you know, if this was I'm saying this with the problem of code and for this blight, not just everybody gets a free one, right?
I guess the challenge is asking someone to do that in order to provide a $30 service for them.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there will always be the people that take advantage of that, as do developers with tax abatements and everything else. But yeah, just thinking outside the box. Yeah. Okay, thanks, guys. I know I'm done and we're way over time. So thanks for listening.
So I guess we need a little bit of guidance about whether we focus our energy on creating programs or whether we focus our energy on finalizing this ordinance to bring it to you, or some combination of those two.
Sure. George?
Yeah, I just want to, I hear all these exceptions tonight, and it comes up repetitively. I just want to let you know, exceptions make poor policy, right? So we can all think about exceptions to everything. But focusing on the exceptions is a waste of time, right? If you can hit 90%, 80%, then we can do something special for the 20%. But we spent a lot of time tonight talking about exceptions to things, and it's a waste of time. So I'm a little frustrated by that. I suggest that we just pass the ordinance. I'm very much in favor of just saying, come back with the ordinance. It reads pretty good. If it needs to be modified, we modify it as we go along. And, whatever. I guess I'm being a rant then, whatever.
You're okay, George. Better you than me.
I was George would like to see the ordinance. I think, along with Doug's assessment that without the ordinance, how do you show the need? And that can spur more community programs and involvement in those funding dollars. I think I'd be in support of the ordinance and moving forward with it. But I do really think we need to look at programming in concert with that, because I know we probably run into it already with some of the things that we deal with, but this is especially given the economic times we're in, and will continue to be probably. We need to have a tool or a carrot and a stick to help people. So I would, in terms of, looks like Lori, I'm guessing that's an okay with the ordinance, given your comments tonight. Mary and Kristen and Amy, yep. And I know Pete had you had a couple ideas about, especially like the car pickup and things like that. And so I totally agree. We have to have things that are accessible to people. And if you'd like to make a couple comments, feel free.
Just other than, I know we've commented quite a lot on this and spent a lot of time on it. I just feel implementing other stuff, I don't really think is going to help. And I think because I don't know how you're going to take the people that are on fixed income and the elderly people and then sort that out and try to help them.
I think you're right on part of that, but I think we need to do both. We need to have the ordinance watered down at a more where we can have a span of control that we can manage. And then, we've got a lot of great businesses in this community, people that would love to help people. It's just a matter of getting something up and started and working towards that common goal. But that's sometimes easier said than done without the ordinance to justify doing that.
I understand that. And I own a company, and I would be willing to put a truck and a dump truck out there, and people want to put scrap metal out there or old appliances. I'll donate a day and have my crew do that and haul it to the scrap yard. But I just want to help everybody out and make it a level playing field for everybody. I don't want to punish people that are on a fixed income or don't have the money, really want to do it, but can't afford to do it. And I know those people exist out there because I've talked to many of them. And I know you both and the city staff try to help all these people out, and that's my only point. Thank you.
And maybe that's all we can do is, based on this, identify what some of those greater needs are and find a way to look at some of those programs and how they might be able to be funded so we could do it voluntarily instead of through enforcement.
And the other part that I do like about this is the appeal process. And it is very, let's say we miss all the signs. We miss the signs. We totally drop the ball. There is an appeal process to this, which in my opinion is huge, which takes code enforcement out of it. It puts it in somebody else's hands, and that gives the person kind of the final opportunity to bring up those fixed income things, or I can't afford it, or something like that. So I think I do like that aspect of it. Not saying that it should get that far, but that is kind of like the fail safe of this that I like.
Yeah, I like that part too. Pete, I see your hand up, or is that from earlier?
No, that's from earlier. Sorry.
All right. Well, Nancy, how do you feel about the direction we've given?
I think it's given us some direction that we can update this a little bit to address some of the concerns we heard tonight. And then we can also spend some time thinking about how to implement that program piece into it. So we can work on that a little bit more and bring it to you. It won't be at your next meeting. We won't be able to turn around that quickly. But I think we've got enough input tonight that we can improve this and then bring it back to you for official consideration. I think this was very helpful tonight.
Yeah, I want to thank all the work that you guys have put forward. I know this has been a long time coming, and I know Doug with the NRU and Paul and the other code enforcement officials. They work really hard to keep our city safe and to work with people, and and their work on this ordinance is appreciated a lot. So thank you very much. And I think
Thank you, guys.
we're ready to adjourn. So good night, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.